welcome back to the neighborhood. Today we're going to be talking about the winner of all 5 major Game of the Year awards, Baldur's Gate 3.
Welcome to the podcast where 2 longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers. Now, I'm not normally the one who comes on here and introduces everything, so Andrew is missing. Some suspect he was kidnapped by Sony executives. Others suspect that maybe he got kidnapped by Vecna. But we'll see. Hopefully he'll be back next week for another episode. But instead of him, I got his brother and his sister to come in here and help me out with this episode. So
it's
joining me,
yes,
exactly. Joining me is Aubrey Kimball, who you probably recently heard on our episode about Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Say hello, Aubrey.
Kind of technically still Aubrey Kimball, but not really Aubrey Kimball anymore, actually.
Yeah.
But
yes.
Yeah. Yes, I'm back. Hi, everybody.
She was ashamed of the name, so she had to change it.
And making her ashamed of the name, Braedon Kimball, over here.
You know, I couldn't have asked for a better introduction. I was going to say that
I was really nicely.
I was going to say that I was actually. Do y'all call him Andrew or Tom on this podcast?
Andrew.
Okay, I was going to say that I was. There's some lore for the listeners, by the way. I was going to say that I was Andrew's like poorly designed clone, but that works.
Yeah.
Especially because you look more like me than like him.
Yeah, well, and I'm also better than him in every way.
Interesting. He'll probably cut that out.
I hope he hears it, even if he's the only one who hears it.
And I think Braedon's been on the show. I think we talked about Shadow of Mordor.
You know what? You might be right. I don't think I've ever been on FN Gamers, but I think I was on the episode for Shadow of Mordor.
So we are going to be talking about Baldur's Gate 3. This is going to be our sort of deep dive episode into Baldur's Gate 3. So we're going to talk a bit about just like general stuff. Like what is Baldur's Gate 3? If for some reason you're here and you're like, I'm going to listen to this episode, but I don't really know that much about the game. We're going to cover that. We're going to talk about just like gameplay and general stuff without spoilers. And then we're going to jump into like a spoiler section. So I will say the game has a lot of variation. So even if you have played through it one whole time, there could still be stuff in the spoiler section you are not aware of. So if you care about that, we'll make sure that we kind of flag that for you. Anyway, so Baldur's Gate 3 was developed and published by Larian Studios. They previously had made Divinity Original Sin, Divinity Original Sin 2, and a bunch of other games, but those were kind of like the ones where they started getting a little bit more notoriety within the gaming industry. It's based on the world of Dungeons and Dragons, set in the land of Faerun, or Faerun, I think is how they say it in the game. I don't know. But it's the first 2 games, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, I believe, were made by BioWare back when BioWare made good games. And they, somewhere along the way, I don't know if they lost rights or what, but Larian Studios kind of took over and developed Baldur's Gate 3. They initially released it in early access in 2020. I believe it was like the first act was basically what was early access. I don't know how much of Act 2 and 3 actually were early access. I did not play it in early access.
I think they started with Act 1 and then they were kind of continuously adding content throughout the pre-release period. And I'm only speculating on this based on Reddit posts that I dug up trying to spoil things for myself.
Yeah. So it was in early access for 2-3 years. It came out, like, the full release happened August of 2023 for PC. I think it came out like a month later or something like that on PlayStation. And then it came out the night of the Game Awards for Xbox. When they won Game of the Year, they were supposed to get up there and announce it was on Xbox, but they were rushed off stage and also forgot because they were excited. So,
Fair.
So it's a role-playing game, like an RPG, kind of traditional RPG, Western RPG. You create a character, or you can pick from one of the pre-generated ones that have like their own kind of personal quests, and then you're kind of set on the path of the game. And so that's the general idea of what this game is. And so now we're going to kind of jump into the spoiler-free kind of discussion of some of the finer details here.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you're doing in this game is creating a character. Ton of options, an overwhelming number of options for some people.
It is a lot, for sure.
So there are 11 different races, 12 different classes. Each class has somewhere between 3 and like 6 or 7 subclasses. And then you pick like a background as well. So what did everyone go with? What did you make for your first character, for the character that you like played through the game as?
Well, for my first attempt to play through, because Joe and I had played Divinity Original Sin 2, part of why we picked up Baldur's Gate 3, beyond just a lot of the good buzz we were hearing about it from early access, was an attempt to play the multiplayer again. So when we made our characters, he rolled a monk, just kind of a run-of-the-mill monk, and then I sort of loosely I went with a cleric because we had a cleric in our D&D campaign. That was the first thing I played, and I really enjoy spellcasters like that. And then we didn't make it super far into it. We didn't make it to Act 2. I think we were like right on the precipice of Act 2.
Yeah.
And then we kind of stalled out, and like our schedules kind of desynced a little bit. And so then we both ended up making our own or like solo playthroughs and going from there. So, but she wasn't a half orc like she was in our D&D campaign. I think my first one, I did a Tempest cleric because I had thought about switching in our D&D campaign. She's a life cleric. And I thought about switching her to a Tempest cleric because they have a lot of fun abilities. And so I named her Kefira, which is a Celtic word for like thunder or storm or something like that. And I really like the name, so I'm probably going to reintroduce that into our D&D campaign at some point.
Nice.
And then on my first solo, my other D&D character is a Circle of Wildfire tiefling druid. But the Circle of Wildfire isn't in Baldur's Gate 3, so I went with Circle of Land, and I did a half-elf druid.
Nice.
For the solo playthrough on that.
What about you, Braedon?
I was also not creative and made my D&D campaign character for my first playthrough.
That's fair.
It's a great jumping off point.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit how much I learned about the mechanics of D&D as a game through Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, I'd like to point out we had been playing
we'd
D&D
been in a campaign
regularly for like 2 years.
It was
a hot minute.
Yeah, about 2 years up to that point. And all I had been doing was divine smiting and
booming blading.
And booming blade, yeah. So yeah, I basically made the exact same character, half elf paladin. I do not remember the subclass of paladin. Oh, but you know what? I think you have
Ancients,
a list here.
Devotion, Vengeance, or Oathbreaker.
Oh yeah, I started as devotion, and I forget what my oath was, but I almost immediately broke my oath because I was also applying the loose rules of our D&D campaign to this, which is a lot more strict. So, like, the first chance you get as a paladin to break your oath, I broke my oath. It was when Lae'zel gets captured by the tieflings, and I am very ignorant, so I just walked up and was like, "What are these devil-looking things? I'm a paladin. I should probably smite them and free my companion who saved me on the ship." Right?
Yeah.
Well, and I did initially try the persuasion check, but I failed the persuasion check because some reason. Is persuasion a charisma stat?
It is.
It is.
So that's just shameful because paladins
yeah, you really
are
shouldn't
charisma
have.
classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I failed the persuasion check somehow, and then they got mad at me and were like, "You need to leave or else we're going to attack you." And then I said, "Well, too bad," in the voice of Dwayne The Rock Johnson, "I'm not leaving." So I immediately went into combat and killed them all and freed Lae'zel. And then I went back to my camp that night, and this spooky ghost paladin was like, "You suck at being a paladin, and now you're an oathbreaker." And at first I was mad, but then I looked into Oathbreakers. I was like, oh, this is basically Death Knights from World of Warcraft, but less edgy. And I was into it. So I rolled with that for a while. But I just found that the pace of Baldur's Gate, at least through Act 1, when you are pretty limited on combat abilities, I was just burning through spell slots and items.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also, because it was my first playthrough, I didn't respec Shadowheart, and so Shadowheart was useless, but I was romancing Shadowheart, so I kept her in my party. And I didn't understand how badass Karlach was yet. So I had a weird party. I think I had Lae'zel, Shadowheart, and Gale. And
Okay, it's not bad.
do not... Yeah, but I don't like managing really complicated classes, and Gale is such a headache to play.
Wizards are a lot.
Yeah, I do not enjoy wizards. And so I was just getting dunked on by most things that I fought.
Right.
Up until when I respec'd into fighter and was like, oh, this is
It's like a whole
much better
new
time.
world.
Yeah. And then once I found out you could respec your companions, immediately respec Shadowheart into a life cleric. And I was like, oh, my party can stay alive now.
I've never respected Shadowheart, and like the only character I've respect is towards the end of the third act, like about to go fight my last boss, basically before everything really hits the fan. I went ahead and respect Will from Warlock into Paladin just to see how the Paladin played, basically, because I had taken a feat that let me have Eldritch Blast. And so at that point, between me and Shadowheart, we had most any spell you could need covered. So it was like, Will just never left the camp. And I was like, well, let me make him a paladin. And so I can like swap him with Karlach or Lae'zel and have, him be more of a tanky character. And even after that, I was like, okay, well, this is neat. Go back to camp. I like Karlach's energy.
Will was basically a glorified groupie through my entire first playthrough. I never used him.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about all the companions in a second here. I also played as like basically it's not my D&D character, but it's like my World of Warcraft character that I made like when I was 12, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
wait, let me see if I can remember his name. Talos?
Close.
Talthus.
Yes. That's what it was.
So, and he
in
that game he is a night elf. So in this game he was a drow.
So everybody was racist towards him.
Yeah. So in that and he's obviously heavily inspired by Drizzt Do'Urden from like the Forgotten Realms books, if anyone has ever read those, which are also set in the world of D&D. And so, yeah, it's all basically full circle. But yeah, I made him a ranger, initially Beastmaster, but the pathfinding for the ranger's companions was kind of borked. So I ended up swapping him over to Gloomstalker eventually, just because I liked having the extra body, because like you could summon like a bear or a wolf or a spider or whatever to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And the extra body was nice, but like half the time I'd like not be paying attention, and my bear would have gotten stuck on a door 3 rooms ago, and so I'd start combat and it wouldn't be there, and I'm like, what is going on here?
Where are you?
Yeah, it was annoying. So I got tired of that eventually and just went Gloomstalker. I did so we've already kind of touched on it, but you can multi-class in this, which is essentially just taking, the max level is level 12 that you can go up to in this game. And so every time you get a level, you can either continue taking it in whatever the initial class that you picked was, or you can pick it in a different class to get some of their abilities. And so I did eventually multi-class into like Gloomstalker and I think Fighter to get like extra attacks.
Yeah, like multi-attack and action surge.
Yeah, what is it? Fighter level 2 or level 3 gives you action surge, which is pretty clutch for a lot of multi-class builds.
Yeah.
My current playthrough that I'm taking at a much slower pace, I'm doing an Eldritch Blast build. So it's Warlock, Sorcerer multi-class.
The Swarlock.
Yeah, so it's really mostly Sorcerer. You just take Warlock up to whatever level you need to get Eldritch Blast.
Level 1.
Yeah, I think I have 2 or 3 levels of Warlock. I forget exactly what you need out of that.
Every time you level up Warlock, you get like or not every time, but a lot of times you'll get like a modifier to Eldritch Blast. And so
so it can like push or do
I think it was the push that I needed.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, the Sorcerer lets you can take, I forget what they're called, but they're basically buffs that you can spend sorcery points on as passives that let you like have extra abilities on your turn. So one of them lets you spend sorcery points to cast spells that would normally be an action as bonus actions. So you can shoot like 2 Eldritch Blasts per attack or something crazy.
Nice.
The whole build is around casting Eldritch Blast like 6 times in one turn by the time you're level 12.
Pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, this current playthrough that I'm taking a lot slower and trying to like dig into corners I didn't make it into on my first playthrough. And on my first one, I tried to just respond like how I would have responded in that situation and be more kind of an honest to myself. And this one is less of the like, not quite goody two shoes, but less of the emphasis on like, no, this is like, it's not my ideal playthrough. It's what did I miss? So like I managed to get both Halcyon and Minthara on this one. And I had started playing as a monk because I just wanted to see what that played like. And a little bit inspired by Bo from Critical Role. Like gets really capable pretty quickly. And so I thought that was pretty fun, but I really miss the functionality of so many of the spells that you have outside of combat with a full caster. Especially
That's the cool
in early
thing
game.
About the Eldritch Blast build is that because really your only combat spell is Eldritch Blast, you take like all utility spells outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes my character, my Tav, I guess you call it, in my party very useful.
Yeah, very utilitarian. So I wanted to get that chest that has the curse on it that only Selûnite can open it or handle it. Because I saw someone take that and like drop it in the goblin camp. And I was like, how many ways can I mess with the goblins on this playthrough? So I respec'd into that. And then immediately Shadowheart and I were not friends anymore, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went Tempest Cleric again and looked up a build. Because I had the idea as a druid, because I'd played Tempest Cleric, you can channel your divinity to do maximum damage on any thunder or lightning spells. And then the druid gets Call Lightning, which is a concentration spell that lets you strike your enemies with a bolt of lightning. Yeah. It does 3d10 damage. And it's an area of effect, and it's just super handy. And so I was like, oh man, like that channel divinity with Call Lightning, or even just the lightning bolt spell, that has been super helpful because that's got a massive range on it and does a ton of damage. Yeah. And couple that with the channel divinity, and with an upcast right now, I think I'm doing, if they don't make the save, it's like a guaranteed 54 damage.
Nice.
which has been super helpful because you can't multi-class in like the story mode. Like in easy mode, you can't multi-class.
Why not?
I don't know. I'm not sure. So like in my first playthrough, one of the fights stalled me out so bad that I dropped the difficulty to get through it. And then I just stayed in that lower difficulty because I was just more interested in story than, really tactile combat.
Yeah.
But then this time I did want to really like try and play around with how the different classes might interact with each other in a single character. And from there, I was like, look, if you're comfortable enough to be monkeying around with your build like this, you need to play in Adventurer. Like,
yeah,
you're a big kid, go ahead. And it's been fine.
Well, and I guess too, like it doesn't, like you can freely swap difficulties. So I guess you could always just swap into like the harder mode spec and then drop it back down. But yeah, that is weird that it's like, I guess in story mode, their thinking could be like, oh, well, they don't have to worry too much about the combat. So like this is an added complication, but it's weird that they like did that.
Yeah, that was, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
So
I've been doing a throwing build with my Karlach on this playthrough.
Nice.
So I got this Spear of Return from the Goblin Camp. And
nice.
So you rage and then you can do like the enraged throw and you just yeet the spear and it'll do, if you're above the target too, it'll do like a multiplier of the damage. So it's real fun to get Karlach somewhere up high.
Yeah.
And then you just start dunking on whatever you're fighting.
And it has like a chance to knock him prone too, right?
Yeah, if you're throwing from an elevated surface, I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a ton of different like possibilities that you can do in this game, not only for your own character, but for all of the companion characters as well. For me, I played through the game up until Act 3. I didn't multi-class. I was just kind of putting points where I felt like it. I hadn't looked up a build or anything because I didn't want any spoilers.
Yeah.
And so I was able to do all that up through Act 3. And then I hit one boss fight in Act 3 that we'll talk about later. That was just annoying as shit. And I needed to... I couldn't do it. Like I had to respec because I just wasn't able to do it with the party that I had. And some of that was due to some extenuating circumstances caused by that boss fight. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that if us talking about all these builds is like intimidating, it doesn't have to be. Like you can get, like, there are obviously better builds than others, but you can get a pretty decent way into the game without ever even needing to like I was not putting points into things that were like the most efficient. I'm sure you can get by in the game if you need to, but also they do have different difficulty settings that you can swap freely between. So to me, this game is way more about experiencing the story than like the combat. I do enjoy the combat. It's D&D combat, but as with most RPGs, if you're just in it for the story, there are options to get you through it. You can experience the entire story. So,
yeah. And it's the easier mode it's not like baby mode where you don't have to like think at all about anything, but it is way easier.
Yeah. I think they like
your health doubles and your enemy's health drops and
yeah. Like you can still get taken out, but it gives you a lot more leeway.
Yeah. I don't think it like hampers the AI or anything, but it may drop the damage they do a hair.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like, some easy mode games where you're just like running through and nothing can touch you. Like it still requires some thought.
Yeah. Basically what we're saying is there's no excuse for you to play this game. But
I wouldn't know. I'm not a casual.
But also too, I think most of the like boss fights have some sort of gimmick, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Towards the end too. And so even if like the bosses are not doing as much damage, there's usually something else you're supposed to be doing in a boss fight that is complicating things. And so, but yeah, so we've mentioned companions a bunch already. There are 6 origin companions, quote unquote, that you can pick as like your starting character as well. So if you don't want to create your own custom character, you can play as either Astarion, Gale, Karlach, Lae'zel, Shadowheart, or Will. Astarion is a rogue, Gale is a wizard, Karlach is a barbarian, Lae'zel is a fighter, Shadowheart is a cleric, and Will is a warlock. There are also 4 other companions that you'll get throughout the game, or have the option to get throughout the game. We've already mentioned Halsin and Minthara, but I'm not going to mention the other 2 until we get a little bit later on, because you don't get, like, Halsin and Minthara you can kind of get in Act 1, but the other 2 don't show up until later on in the game. So we won't spoil those for you guys. But they all of the companions come with like their own sort of personal quest, at least the 6 origin ones. Halsin also kind of comes with his own quest, but they've all got like something that they want to do in addition to the main story quest. And so how much you kind of engage with that is up to you, but it's kind of like it fleshes out their character and the game, honestly. So,
which I don't know if that's a Baldur's Gate thing, but it's definitely a Larian thing, because that was the case in Divinity Original Sin 2. Like, I played as one of the pre-made characters in that, and Joe did too for our co-op playthrough. And it's a really nice shorthand and helps bake in some sort of like individual like plot thing, because all of the story points that you can hit in that origin you can also interact with if they're your companion. So
playing the game itself, it kind of is split between like just exploring and combat. When you're exploring, you're just kind of running around in third person. Now I played on Xbox, and so I was like using the thumbstick to move around, and you could control the camera with the right thumbstick. You could also like click one of them to unlock the camera and kind of like explore how I would imagine you probably do with the mouse in the like on PC.
So
like kind of move your mouse around.
Well, for mine, and I think it's the default, it's actually WASD to move the camera.
Okay.
And then Q and E to rotate the camera. And then you click where you want them to go.
Okay.
And then you can like right click to open up like the menu of interaction options and stuff along those lines. And then obviously the roller bar to zoom out and in.
Yeah. I like playing it on Xbox. I was impressed with how good they made most of like the menus and stuff feel. Obviously, I would imagine it feels a whole lot better on PC because it's definitely built for the PC first.
A mouse makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, but it's functional on controller, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a computer that can handle it, but you do have like an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5, I think those are good options.
Yeah, I've seen clips of like the way that the menu pops up or the way that it interacts. And obviously I haven't like watched you or Andrew play, so I don't know the buttons or whatever it's bound to, but it is like those kind of spiral
it's like a radial
and stuff.
menu.
Yeah, which work nice with the control stick versus on the PC. It's very, I mean, World of Warcraft is the closest companion I have to it, and I'm sure the man rating behind me would definitely have would disagree in how I'm comparing them, but it's got like a grid along the bottom of like your spells and your attacks and all of the options you can do, and then the other menus and stuff are pulled up more grid like rather than on like a wheel, because you have the benefit of the mouse to click and drag and move around.
Like inventory management did kind of suck on the console.
I'm sure,
but it was functional. It was passable. And it's not like you're changing out your equipment super often, especially once you get 10, 15 hours into the game and you've kind of got like, okay, this is a good sword or this is a good bow or whatever. And if I happen to pick something better up, I'll get to it. While you're exploring, you run into a ton of NPCs. Most of them have stuff for you to do, but you have a bunch of like dialogue options that will come up. Some of them are kind of just like your baked in dialogue options that everybody has, but they also will include stuff like from your class. So sometimes you'll have like a class, like I played a ranger, and so sometimes in conversation it would have an option that was sort of tagged as like a ranger. And so it was like, oh, okay, so because of my knowledge from my class, I can say, this. They have some that are tied to like your background. So
I was gonna say, I think across most of your demographics. My current playthrough, I'm a tiefling, so that comes up quite a bit.
yeah.
Yeah, I just unlocked the necromancy of Thay without sacrificing anything because I'm a sorcerer, and I could like read the weave that was inside of the book and calm it down.
Yeah. Well, and it can also give you like situational advantages too. I've noticed it'll let you roll with advantage.
Yeah.
Mostly as my cleric of Selune has been very helpful, very plot relevant.
Yeah.
Aren't there also like open world benefits depending on your class too?
Yes. So like sometimes you'll come across something in the environment. It's not necessarily based on your class, I guess, but it's more like your skills and stuff. And so like you'll come across a statue or some writing on a wall or something like that, and it'll just have you make like a arcana check or something.
Mm-hmm.
And if your character like passes it, then the DM narrator will kind of be like, here's some information that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And inspiration is tied to your background pretty heavily.
Yeah, so inspiration lets you, because the game is based on Dungeons and Dragons, so a lot of the things, pretty much everything that you're doing in the game, you're doing some sort of dice roll. And inspiration lets you re-roll the dice if you don't get the result that you want. And so there was, I was like a folk hero or something maybe. And so basically anytime that like I helped people out in the world, like saved them from a monster or something, I would get inspiration for it.
Nice.
But there's a lot that you can kind of like do. There's also a lot tied to like spells and stuff. So if you get the spell Talk to Animals, anytime that you come across like a random animal in the world, you can kind of just like talk to it.
So worth it. Get that spell.
They also have like Speak to Dead as a spell, so that you can, there's a lot of dead bodies around the world. You can use Speak to Dead to kind of like get information from them. There's also various like small spaces to squeeze through. I haven't played like a gnome or a halfling, so I don't know if you can get through those spaces as like a gnome or a halfling, or if it's like specific to like a druid turning into a mouse or something.
Cat, but yeah, that's how I got through it.
Yeah,
because I somehow ended up with a helmet that lets you change your race, and I don't know if I ever actually tried it. So that was kind of a meaningless contribution.
I wonder if like a disguise self spell would work, or if it's just like an illusion, or if it does.
That's what the helmet was. It was a helmet that would essentially give you a free disguise self.
Nice.
But I only ever used it in the Grim Forge.
Yeah, because
there
was some point that we'll talk about later where I used like a helmet of disguise self to try to like walk through parts of it without getting attacked, and it kind of worked. But essentially the game, like all of the quests that it gives you, it's kind of like, here's your objective, kind of figure out how you want to do it. And it's not like it's just like completely hands off. It's more one of those things where it's like they went through and they thought of so much that it feels like they kind of thought of everything. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna like, here's, for example, there's like the main thing in Act 1 is a sort of a fight between some goblins and the druids. We've already kind of mentioned that, so it's not, not super spoilers. You find this out like 15 minutes into the game, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
you
if you're
can
that
kind of-
pressed about spoilers, maybe don't
Yeah.
listen to a deep dive about Baldur's Gate 3. I'm just
True.
saying. Like,
Yeah, it's hard.
we'll try and avoid heavy plot stuff in this first section, but also, like,
Yeah.
come on.
But like there are so many different options for it, like essentially you can pick like, do I want to help the druids? Do I want to help the goblins? Do I want to help nobody? And then each of those things that you pick, like if you pick I want to help the druids, there's also like 5 other ways that you can go about helping the druids. If you pick, okay, I'm going to help the goblins, there's like 5 ways you can help the goblins. If you don't want to help anybody, there's a lot of ways that you can screw everybody over. And so that is, I guess, the game in a nutshell, to me, is like, yeah, there's combat. Yeah, it's exploration, but it's also like, hey, here's a thing that we want you to do. Figure out how you want to do it. And we've thought of that. And we have stuff in the game for when you come up with that solution. So,
Yeah, from a player's choice standpoint and the different ways that you can go about approaching a problem, it ranks up there among like mainstream games. I don't think that's like the entire point of the game. So obviously,
yeah,
someone out there will be like, oh, well, actually, this game did that way better. And Baldur's Gate 3 didn't do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's a huge failing. And like, sure, but also relative to, in my experience, Tomb Raider and Mass Effect, this is wild, dude. Like, this is a lot.
You've obviously never played Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
No, I just listed the 2 games I've played before.
A real paragon of player's choice.
Mm-hmm. So eventually you're going to get into some combat. When you get into combat, it swaps over to like a turn-based tactics mode. They have you roll for initiative, just like you do in D&D. Just like in D&D, I usually roll poorly. But then it kind of just cycles through like, okay, this character's going, this character's going, this character's going. And it works just like D&D combat pretty much. I mean, there are some slight changes to make it a better game.
I'd say something that whoever listens to this should know is that if in combat you have 3 of your party members all going right after each other, you can decide what order they go in.
Yep.
So if it makes more sense strategically to have the third person in that lineup do something first, you can do that. I didn't learn that till probably Act 3 of my first playthrough. And I was, very disappointed.
I had a adjacent problem where sometimes I would have like an attack queued up on someone and they'd be like, no, actually, I don't want to do that with this. Like, I don't want to start with them. I need to move this person and do whatever. And then I would click on that person's profile and then they would make that attack on the person that I clicked on. And
oops.
It's like, I mean, it's not out of character for Astarion to try and shoot Lae'zel in the butt, but also that's not what I wanted you to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like different tactical stuff you can choose to do. Like you said, Braedon was saying like you can change the order. You can have people attack your own people. If someone goes down, you can have your character like throw a health potion at them and they can get back up.
Mm-hmm.
You can also like there's environmental effects. So like you can put down grease and light it on fire. You can use sort of like environmental things to sort of supplement. And I know that's something that Larian's done, at least in Divinity 2. I don't remember if they did it in like the first Divinity Original Sin, but at least in the Original Sin 2, like you could freeze water, you could do, like all of this stuff. And so you can kind of manipulate the terrain a little bit. But yeah, there's a ton that you can do there. Like we said earlier, bosses usually have some sort of a gimmick that you're trying to deal with. It's not as prevalent in like Act 1, but there are still a bunch of like boss fights in Act 1 that are not just like slugfests where you are trying to do as much damage as possible in, before it out damages you. There's usually some sort of like, oh, okay, here's a thing in the environment I need to interact with in order to like do some damage or something like that.
Yes. On that note, queuing up explosive barrels just anytime you have the chance to do that.
Baromancy is quite the powerful skill.
Yes.
Always goes well.
So I think that's probably about all that we can talk about without spoilers. So we'll wrap up with just kind of a well, first, Aubrey, you said you played co-op. So
yes.
Assuming you were probably like Braedon, did you do co-op at all?
Yeah. I've done a decent bit of co-op with some friends.
So I have not done any co-op, so I was going to pass it to you guys to just chit chat about the co-op experience for a little bit, in case anyone listening is like a big co-op gamer. What do you guys have to say about the co-op experience?
So I would recommend you play with someone who has a similar play style as you. So my husband is more of a like run ahead and do things. Our party was split for most of the time we were doing it. He would usually have Shadowheart with him because he was playing as a monk. And so then he would have a caster and a healer. And then I was a cleric. So when we picked up Astarion, I kept him with me because I am a like in the nooks and crannies. What's over here? Let's lockpick this. What's going on there? Like I am perpetually encumbered, which is part of why Lae'zel and Karlach stay in my party. Because they're a couple of strong ladies who can carry lots of things. So that had us split up a fair bit, and then one of us would bump into an encounter and be like, where are you? I need help. Like, this is a fight designed for a full party, and it's just me and the sneaky little elf boy. Like, we need help. So, like, stumbling across the harpies, and we'd usually, like, take a stab at doing it on our own, and then have that, like, have you saved recently moment when things would go sideways. So that would be my big piece of advice is, you know, either find someone who has a similar play style as you, or just make sure you're really communicating as you go through it, and saving often.
Yeah. So that's good advice in general, is to save often.
All the time.
Yeah. And don't invite your friends to your first campaign. Just in general, I think that's good advice because you should experience it on your own when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, because it does split story interactions too.
Yeah. Well, and in my experience, I mean, I was smart enough to at least save, so there was like a planted flag before all the chaos happened, but I had some friends join my campaign, and we went into Grimforge, and it kind of just descended into us there. So you may or may not be aware of there's a special kind of explosive that you have to get while you're down there. And they're essentially, I wouldn't say nuclear bombs, but maybe equivalent to like a Moab, which is a type of bomb that stands for mother of all bombs. It's just a huge explosive. So anyways, it kind of led to them like planting them in random places and then blowing up important NPCs, and then us having to save scum because we were just ultimately just screwing around, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But if you're trying to make progress, maybe don't have your friends join your campaign.
Yeah, that is kind of the ultimate takeaway. After you've played it on your own and have had that experience, and then you just want to be in that world with some friends, kind of like messing around. Yeah, I think that's a great experience. But from a search perspective, it's not great.
Yeah, unless you have like a predetermined campaign idea that you want to run through the whole game with a specific group of friends and maintain consistency throughout, where everyone has a role and you have it planned. Like some friends have been trying to get me to join their Dark Urge playthrough.
Yeah. Well, that'd be fun.
Yeah. They just want to essentially go through and kill and do
a murder hobo
actions.
Run.
Yeah.
So sounds like co-op is good, like it functions. It's just it's
not the optimal way to experience the story.
From a technical perspective, it works great. The combat's usually pretty smooth. I will say, if you have friends who are prone to getting distracted, especially in large combat scenarios, it can get annoying when you're like, you've done your turn, and then it's kind of like real D&D. You do your turn.
Yeah, I was going to say, so just like real thing.
Yeah, you do your turn, and then you're just kind of sitting there for 25 minutes, and you're like, are they even taking their turn right now? Do they know it's their turn? And then you're like, dude, it's your turn. They're like, oh, shit, my bad, I was on TikTok or whatever, and then they do what they need to do.
Yeah.
So that can be annoying.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of alluded to it, but it is a long game. Like if you are signing up to play through with somebody the full thing, I know I clocked in somewhere between like 100 and 120 hours, because of like there was at one point where I had to like go back a few hours because of like I didn't realize how the game was working, and just kind of like leaving it on and stuff. So somewhere in that range, I think my final like clock was like 110 hours or so, but then like when I look on Xbox it says I played for 130 hours. So
I think my first playthrough was somewhere between 80 and 90, but I did kind of get a little min-maxy towards the end, and so I was just blitzing through and also Act 3 was a lot shorter than I thought it would be, which we'll probably get into that when we go to the spoiler section. But
my first start to finish playthrough was right at around 80 hours, which was with me pretty... I think I breezed through Act 1 and certainly didn't do... I missed a decent chunk of Act 2.
Yeah.
And then I accidentally severely accelerated Act 2 without realizing it, and then like did a whole bunch, and then had to circle back because there was a lot of stuff I would have done if I'd known that was how I was supposed to do it. So then I like undid several hours of progress to then add like 8 more hours onto my playthrough. But yeah, even with all that back and forth, that campaign was right around 8 hours or 80.
So it is a chunky game.
Mm-hmm.
Keep that in mind, just in general, but also especially with co-op. If you are trying to get 4 people together to commit to 120 or like 80 to 120 hours of gameplay, you may find it very similar to real D&D, where it's impossible to get everybody together consistently. So the last 2 things I want to touch on before we jump into spoilers is mods. I'm playing on Xbox. Larian has said they plan to bring like mod support to consoles eventually, but have not yet. But you guys are both on PC. Have you done anything with mods?
I have not. I don't know how.
It depends on the mod, but it's usually pretty straightforward. Really, all I'm doing right now is the extended, I forget what the mod's called, but it lets you have more than 4 party members at a time.
That's the main one I want.
That would be my first
ability to not have to leave people in camp.
Yeah, and I'm purposely not abusing it, so I really only have 5 total. I just have 1 extra because I wanted to have Karlak and Lae'zel in my party. Although, talking about friends joining, I had 2 friends join me when I was running that mod, and we tried to max it, like stress test it. So we had all of the companions, 2 extra players, so that's like 9 people. Then we hired as many of the hirelings as we could. So we ended up having like 14, I think, characters out in the open world. Yeah. And we ran through the goblin camp and just massacred everything.
And it held up? Like the mod did okay?
Yeah.
The game did okay?
The mod didn't, there was no crashing or anything, at least for me. I think one of my friends had a bunch of other mods on their computer that were conflicting and he was having issues. It would randomly just crash. But I haven't had any issues. And even now, since they've done the hotfixes, I haven't played in a while. I didn't update the mod and it was complaining like, you have a data mismatch, and I still can play and it hasn't had problems.
It's also done that to me when I don't have any mods. Like I've had some moments where it's like, Mom, you haven't like saved some character choices. I think after like leveling up or something didn't like settle into place nicely. And so it was giving me grief about saving on stuff, but it didn't actually like negatively impact my game at all. But yeah, that would be probably my first mod I would install.
Yeah. But yeah, that is an option for those of you that like mods. It'll continue to expand, I'm sure, as the game is out for longer. I know I've seen like people add like different like races that are not in the game. Like I saw somebody add Azamar to the game, and I'm sure that there will be some like unofficial expansions. And
I want my Circle of Wildfire.
Yeah, like I'm sure that there will be people adding spells and classes, or like I think pretty much all the D&D classes are in there, except for like Artificer. But I'm sure there will be a ton more like subclasses and stuff added as well. So pretty cool. If you're interested, it should give it a lot of longevity, I would imagine. So before we jump into spoilers, like the people that only want the spoiler-free version, would you recommend this game to go play? I know personally I would. I think it's a fantastic game. I would recommend you go play it if you haven't yet, and maybe come back and join us for the spoiler section later. But if you want to come through the spoilers, I'm not your mom. Like, you can do what you want. But what about you guys? Do you recommend this game?
I've been going first. I was going to let Braedon go first. But yes, I would definitely recommend it. Even if this kind of sort of tactical approach, like the game style is not one that has like historically appealed to me. I've never been a big fan of like sort of a top-down sort of tactical approach to things. The story elements and the character interactions and the persuasion, deception, all of that is so nice. And then if the combat's really not your thing, you can dial it way back and go in like explorer mode or whatever and have combat that you can breeze through fairly easily. Like, and it's just such a big game and a big world and lots of little nooks and crannies to dive into.
Yeah.
That it makes you feel like there's not a lot going on because there's been so much going on that when you do find an empty corner, you're like, you couldn't put anything in here. And it's like,
yeah.
No, they only filled 85% of literally every corner. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say you as the player are the limiting factor in how much you get out of the game. So if you're an ultra mega sweat like Aubrey's husband, then you can really dig into it and min-max all your stats and get into the nuts and bolts of the mechanics and strategize every encounter. Or if you want to just cruise, you could do that too.
Yeah.
I find myself doing a little bit of both. Depends on my mood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would only not recommend it if you are like in a bad situation with your relationships, and you should be tending to those instead of wasting away in a hole for 80 hours.
Yeah.
But other than that,
so
yeah.
valid.
All right. So that is like, we across the board recommend checking this game out. It is fantastic.
3 out of 5 doctors agree.
Yeah. From here on out, we are going to be talking spoilers. So if you don't want to hear those, see ya. But if you want to keep listening, we can't tell you what to do. You're your own person. So, make your choice.
Yeah, they really are just, there's no reason to put a spoiler on a rear-wheel drive car. I mean, you already get traction. That's fine.
Okay.
That
I know that's
going to
get cut out
very
anyways.
Small point of our audience. So, but,
also, it was incorrect because rear-wheel drive cars need the downforce. I got it backwards.
Yeah.
Front-wheel drive cars, unless you're like circuit racing.
Now it'll get left in. But
yeah.
That is a comment so specific to our audience that I think it will only apply to one person, and that's if you listen to this episode, Braedon.
Yeah, and then I'm going to be like, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
So I don't edit these. I assume Andrew will put some like music or whatever here, and then when the music's over, we'll come back.
Or he'll just leave it how it is. And the segue will be my mediocre joke about
Yeah.
aerodynamic components on race cars.
Spoilers are happening now, people.
Yes. Welcome back. They are happening right now. So
Snape
the way
kills
that
Dumbledore.
Hugh
Gandalf
Jackman
the
was
Grey didn't actually
killing-
die. Comes back as Gandalf the White.
Hugh Jackman
Whoa.
was killing his clones in the Tesla machine, and what's his name? Christian Bale was actually a set of twins. Pulling off the
Ant-Man
trick.
actually did not go into Thanos to kill him.
pulled the eject cord there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Whoa.
Classic. Indiana Jones. Every Indiana Jones movie made after the 80s sucks. That's not really a spoiler, but
Spoilers.
Spoiler.
yeah.
Anyway, the way that I kind of conceptualize this is we'll kind of go through by the acts. So there's a prologue, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then like a tiny little epilogue. So the game starts with a pretty cool cutscene.
Mm-hmm. Gorgeous
Which
graphics.
is
That
also-
will never be seen again.
Yeah. Also the trailer. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you may see that as part of that is the trailer for the game, is that opening cutscene. Essentially, there's this mind flayer ship that is going around abducting people. It's being chased by Githyanki and some dragons that are trying to attack it. On board is you, your character, and a mind flayer puts a little mind flayer parasite in your brain. Eventually, Red Dragon kind of breaks in and kills the mind flayer and stuff, and so you're able to escape. On the ship, you meet Lae'zel, Githyanki warrior, who was also captured and infected, and Shadowheart, who you kind of get the... Lae'zel, I think, is just always out and with you. Shadowheart, you can choose whether or not you let her out.
They throw Shadowheart at you. If you ignore her in the ship, there's like 4 other places where they basically just make her appear and force her into the story.
Yeah. See, I've never ignored her, so
Same. But essentially, this is the tutorial. I think it's probably like 30 minutes or so.
if that.
About right.
Yeah. And at the end of it, the ship crashes. So then we move on to Act 1.
You're saved by a mysterious force.
Yes, a mysterious force that... Because I guess that's something that we didn't really touch on. At the beginning of the game, you create your character, but you also create a dream guardian. And it does not explain to you at the beginning of the game what that means.
But it definitely reads like something from My Little Pony.
Yes. And you're like, okay.
Dream Guardian?
Yeah, like, let me make this person, like, cool. And then you find out later what that means. And we'll talk about that when we get to Act 3.
I mean, we can touch on it a little bit now.
Yeah.
Because it's well, I guess we can wait until we introduce the artifact. But yeah.
So you wake up on the beach, crash ship. Scattered around the crash ship are like the introductory companions, basically. So Shadowheart, I think, is also just kind of chilling right around there.
Yeah, she's on the
Asterion-
beach with you.
Yeah, Asterion is right there. Gale is like inside a portal. And you pull him out real quick. And then Lae'zel is captured by some tieflings, like Braedon was saying. But you can save her pretty easily.
Without killing the tieflings.
Yeah. It's interesting that the paladin is the one that went into the wholesale slaughter, and the ranger and the cleric were both like, yeah, I'm going to solve this without violence.
I tried to solve it without violence first. I'm just not very charismatic, apparently.
But pretty much right away, they present you with kind of the overarching theme of Act 1, which is, hey, you've got this mind flayer parasite. That's a bad thing. For some reason, it hasn't already killed you and turned you into a mind flayer, but it is going to do that. And so you need to find some cure. That is kind of like the main mission that you were given right out of the gate, is find a cure for your mind flayer parasite.
Yep, that's the driving force of Act 1 is following leads and chasing them down. That's what gets you embroiled with the conflicts that are going on in Act 1.
Yes. And so basically that is like a great example of how this game works, in that it's like, this is the big overarching thing. Here are a bunch of different options for ways that you could potentially solve this issue. So like, you meet Lae'zel. Lae'zel is immediately like, hey, my people have been fighting the Mind Flayers for a long time. So if we go to my people, they have a machine that'll remove the Mind Flayer parasites from us.
That is such a gentle way of portraying Lae'zel. It is more accurately,
And
hey,
also the
moron,
machine.
my people have a way to fix this. We must get there now.
Yeah, she is pretty demanding.
Which I love
well,
her for it,
you know,
don't get me wrong. But
she is Githyanki, and she's very aware of how quickly the parasites act.
And for a Githyanki, she is incredibly generous and understanding.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also, all of these have character development throughout the game. So I'm also thinking of Lae'zel after like 100 and something hours of the game, where she is a lot more chill
Once you
than
get to
she
know her,
was
and
at
you're
the
like,
very
oh,
beginning.
best girl.
Exactly. So, like Lae'zel's got that option. You know that there's some tieflings in the area, some druids in the area. And so you're like, okay, maybe the druids can help us. Inside the druids' place, there's like 2 healers. One of them's like, oh, I don't have the stuff to fix you here. Come over to my hut in the woods. Like, I've got the potions there. The other is like, maybe the head druid can help you, but he's not here right now. He's been captured by some goblins, they think. And then you can find like some goblins, and they're like, hey, like, we have a priestess over here. She can maybe help you. And so you've got like all of these different like ways that you can kind of go just from pretty much the start of the game. And you can choose, like, you can kind of run all of those leads down, or you can kind of just pick one and go with that. What did you guys do?
Oh, I poked around the druid camp a lot because they were obviously in kind of a state of disarray with everything going on, because I don't know. I think the tieflings also made it out of Avernus
Yeah.
at the same time as like the Mind Flayer ship or something. Like, they're a recent arrival to the area. And
Yeah, they're refugees.
yeah. And the goblins are trying to hunt down the Druid Grove, and the tiefling's presence is kind of helping them do that. And so the head druid, like you said, is unavailable. He's wandered off. And so the druid that is left in charge is like, yeah, no, forget these tieflings, get them out of here. We need to seal up the grove. Like, and so you can get involved in that conflict as much as you want to.
Yeah.
And I was pretty immediately like, nah, Kaga. Hey, look, I am also a druid, and this is not how we druids do it. Okay, this is not the teachings of Sylvanas. This is not how we do.
Yeah.
And so she and I were pretty immediately at odds, but obviously games like to reward you for being good, so that was not any kind of a significant issue. I did end up getting the achievement at the end of the game where I saved literally every tiefling that you could save, story-wise. So that obviously pretty heavily covers. But I did keep my options fairly open. Like, I didn't go into the goblin camp swinging or anything.
Yeah.
And then I honestly stumbled across Auntie Ethel, just kind of in exploring that area in Act 1. I didn't talk to her until my second playthrough when she was in the Grove, which I think on her first co-op playthrough, Joe actually ended up talking to her. So he was like, yeah, I talked to her in the camp and she told me she might have a way. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, seems not great.
Yeah. Did you go a certain direction, or are you kind of like all over the place, Braedon?
First playthrough, I pretty much immediately sided with the druids because I didn't really understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And I wandered into that village with all the goblins that ambush you. And I didn't want to use we haven't touched on this yet, but you would also discover that the parasite gives you like psionic power, and so
The
you can
illithid
manipulate people's minds and stuff. And so, but when you do it, you get this really ominous voice message from the narrator that's like, you sense that you've permanently lost a part of yourself
Yeah.
doing this. And I was like, oh, I don't think I want to do that. So I, instead of forcing the goblins to let me through, making them think I was one of their like
true souls.
True
what they call
souls
it.
of the absolute, I ended up just saying, screw you guys, and ended up getting into combat. And so I killed all of the goblins, and then I pretty much just YOLO'd my way through the whole thing, and it was really sloppy.
Yeah, my first playthrough, I didn't use any of the like illithid powers or, consume any of the parasites. The second playthrough, I'm doing it and playing around with it because
Same.
When you can get an illithid on your team in Act 3, it is pretty nice. And so I wanted to see how that would play out.
It also helps you kind of brute force certain dialogue things that are like, if things are on the edge of a knife as whether it goes one way or another and you don't want to risk it, the illithid powers are like usually a stupidly easy roll. It's like a wisdom 5 or something.
Yeah.
You have to beat.
For like the true soul dialogue options or even I've given Astarion a couple because he's the only one who was like, give me some of that power, I'll take a brainworm, are you kidding me? Whereas all the rest of the companions are like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, well, this isn't an evil playthrough, so I won't do that to you. More for me.
Because it is a neutral decision, but the way that the game presents it does feel like it's a very like evil situation. And then just like mind flayers in general feel just kind of evil, like taking away choice from people.
I do think they're generally just flat out pretty evil as far as D&D enemies go.
But that touches on like the goblins are all part of this cult of the absolute. And so there are a bunch of different, like, regardless of what you choose, you're probably going to end up in the cult grounds at some point. And there are several different ways, like Braedon was saying, you can kind of just like be like, yes, I am a true soul. Take me to your leader. And they'll just like all of the goblins in the camp will just be like neutral to you. And you can just walk in, walk around, talk to them. Not get attacked until you feel like it, and you can kind of do you can decide what you want to do, talk to the goblins there, and if you decide to take them out, you can kill like 2 of them without like triggering the whole base of enemies, and then eventually you do, like, it kind of all sets off at the end. But you can also like sneak in a couple of different like back ways that you can find and like just kind of come up in where you need to be. And so regardless of what you decide to do, like, there are a ton of different options of how you want to go about doing it. And I'm sure there are some that I didn't even see this game because I didn't think of it.
Yeah. My first playthrough, I went pretty like section by section and sort of just an encounter, rested, healed up a bit. Okay, next encounter, rested, healed up a bit. And I was playing on like the medium mode or not easy mode up until I fought True Soul Near, and then that fight was a bitch. But on my second playthrough, because I had seen videos and stuff about it, I like poisoned the beer and then called for a toast and then was able to talk myself out of, because I was a tiefling, I had thaumaturgy, and so I have advantage on intimidation checks. And so one of the goblins was like, I saw you messing with the drink. You poisoned us. And I was like, and what of it? And he's like, nothing.
Yep.
And then like I convinced the spiders to not kill us. And so then I could shove enemies down into where the spiders were and stuff like that to kind of help ease my path a little bit.
Yeah.
And on my second one, I opted to knock out Minthara instead of killing her. So she showed back up at Moonrise.
Yes, because I was going to say, that is something that you can do, not when I initially went through this part of the game. Like, I think that came in a later patch. But Minthara is a drow. I don't actually know it. Paladin.
Really? I thought she was a rogue.
She's a paladin.
But you can recruit her. I think she was initially kind of meant to be like an evil character companion that you really only got if you were going sort of like the more evil route.
Mm-hmm. Like she and Halsin were supposed to be opposite sides of the coin. You could only have one.
Yeah. But obviously we want everything. And so they patched in a way that you could have everything. And so you can knock her out, and you said she shows back up in Act 2.
At Moonrise Towers. In the scene where they introduce Ketherick, she's there explaining the failure of the Druid Grove, and she gets thrown in prison. And then that one goblin that like attacks him to be like, ooh, he can't be killed. Then that scene just plays out as usual. So you got to break her out of prison.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I haven't made it that far in my second playthrough, but I also knocked her out in my second playthrough. Also, it's going into the goblin camp is a pretty critical part of Act 1 because that's when the artifact is introduced.
Oh, yes.
And you learn why you had to make a random second character when you were making your character.
Yes.
Because that is a being of great power that's trapped in the artifact that is essentially the only thing preventing the worms from turning you into a mind flayer.
Yeah. And you start to get this idea that a bunch of people are looking for that item as well.
Yeah.
Well, more importantly, it keeps you from falling under the Absolute's thrall. Because it's revealed in Act 3 that they modified the worms somehow with, I think, some of the magic that is allowing them to control. We're on the spoiler section. So the Crown of Karsus is controlling the mother brain. And so something with that, like the Karsus magic, allows them to modify the worms so that they don't flip until they say, and go time.
Right, because it's meant to be like a bomb that they ignite to where everyone turns at the same time and then they have their army. So isn't that, I know we touched on why the goblins were going after, or how they were able to find the grove via the tieflings, but they were looking for the grove because they thought the artifact was in the grove, right? Wasn't that the whole point of them attacking the grove? Or were they looking for the night song there? I'm trying to remember.
I think the goblins were just like an army of the Absolute that was kind of like moving through and killing things and headed towards Moonrise. But
Ketherick
like
scolds Minthara for failing.
Yeah.
So what did she fail at? Because I doubt their task was just, hey, kill druids. It was probably the druids have something that we need. And I thought it was the artifact. Or they were looking. She's looking for the artifact. I know she's looking for it because when you talk to her in the goblin camp, she asks you to find it.
I do think they are looking for that artifact as well, but I don't think they really know exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
No, none of the peons do. I think Ketherick does.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know that Ketherick actually knows what it actually is.
Yeah.
Just knows what it can do.
Yeah. And I think very few people knew what it was until like Act 3. Like I think the only thing that knew exactly what it was probably
Vlaakith
until, and I guess the Dream Guardian.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah.
All right. Yeah, I remember now what's inside of it. Yeah.
So there's the druids and the goblins, that whole kind of storyline. Sort of side to that, you can get into the Underdark. And so once you kind of deal with the druids and goblins, everything starts pointing towards Moonrise Towers. They're like, okay, we don't have a cure here. You need to get to Moonrise Tower. There's a curse on the land, so you need something that'll help you get through the curse. And so there's a few different ways that you can kind of find a thing to get you through the curse. One option is going through the Underdark and finding some stuff down there. One option is going through like the Githyanki.
Yeah, the mountain pass.
Kresh mountain pass.
Kresh.
And trying to find something there. And so there's a bunch of different but like your new goal is like, okay, no one here can cure me, headed towards Moonrise Towers. You can optionally fight Auntie Ethel, a hag. There's like a whole storyline there. There's a bunch of stuff going down in the Underdark.
Help Marina.
Yeah.
There's also the gnolls attacking the
the caravan.
Fist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget the name of the Order of Thieves, but they're basically the Thieves Guild from
the
Skyrim.
Zentarum. Yeah.
Yeah, the Zentarum.
And then there is the flaming
the Duke
fist or whatever in the Raven Guard.
Yep, all of that as well in the overworld.
And all during this, you do meet Will eventually. I think you meet him at the Druid's Grove, and he's like, I'm hunting this terrible devil named Karlach. And then you meet Karlach, and she's like super chill.
A literal ray of sunshine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start to learn a little bit about your companions. Astarion tries to eat you. Gale tries to eat all of your magical items.
Find out that Will is
an artifact.
Yeah.
Yeah, Will is actually just a little baby boy who sold his soul to a devil because he's a white knight.
Yep. Because he was lied to and manipulated and...
Yeah. And...
got big protagonist energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I didn't like him. He really felt like he thought he was the main character, and I was like, sorry, dog. That's me.
That's me.
Yeah.
Karlach has a ticking time bomb in her. Like she was banished.
Gale has a literal ticking time bomb in him. So Karlach's just going to die, but Gale will kill everything and everyone around you.
So you start learning all of these things and kind of getting some ideas of like their personal goals. None of those happen like in Act 1, but...
No, you find out about some of their problems, but you don't like learn the extent of it.
Yeah, it's pretty natural in that, you just met these random people. You're not going to tell them all of your life's problems.
Yeah.
Until you get to know them.
And I want to shout out Grimforge because that was a really cool area / boss fight.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially there's like...
Also, use the molds. Yeah. There's 2 best in slot armors that you can get from the Grimforge.
Armor. The adamantine splint armor is unreal.
Yeah, it will carry you all the way to Act 3 if you get the heavy armor. If you have like a fighter or a paladin, any class that wears heavy armor.
Yep. But that's a good example of like a gimmick fight too, though, is like you fight it on this this big forge area.
Yeah, it felt very World of Warcraft raid boss, mechanic heavy.
And you need to like get it into the lava in order to like weaken it, and then you get it to stand on the big like pneumatic hammer is, and you pull a lever and smash it with the hammer to deal damage to it. Like you're not fighting it yourself really.
Which Joe and I managed to kill it without the use of the hammer the first time we did it. We just
how long did that take?
Oh, forever. It took so long and we had to reload a couple times. And then on my second playthrough,
did you just not want to use the hammer, or did
not occur to us. Okay. Did not occur to us. And then on my second playthrough, I was like, oh, I'm like primed and set up for like Owlbear from the top rope. Like I've got a potion that'll enlarge me and the whole 9. And I go and get I reloaded the fight because I was like, oh yeah, I could do that here. Because that's like the highest point you can jump down on an enemy with the Owlbear's attack jump. And I went to queue it up and I started the fight and I went to wild shape, took the potion, and I was multi-classed. So I didn't have the Owlbear wild shape yet. I was like, I'm not going to try and get 3 more levels in order to come back and do this.
Yeah.
I'm proud of myself because I, without looking it up, was able to figure out the hammer mechanic.
Yeah.
And because I remember it walking out, seeing it had like 700 health and being like, there's no way that this is scaled correctly for my level. And so it kind of made sense because it was like, oh, there's the mold thing right here for using the molds and making armor. And there's a very large hammer and oh, look, a lever right there. I wonder.
Yeah.
Pull the lever. Oh, and stumbling across. I've got a list of the bosses in Act 1 pulled up right now. And the spectator is right there. And stumbling across the spectator in the Underdark was one of those reinforces the quick save and the importance of the quick save because it fully ambushes you and then I mean, it is boom, 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 boom. You got stuff coming at you immediately.
Yep.
Mm.
There is a lot of and just kind of getting used to like the adventuring day, quote unquote. So like D&D itself is balanced around like having a certain number of encounters per adventuring day, after which you take a long rest. And so this game is also very much balanced around like you have a couple of encounters, you take a short rest, you have another couple of encounters, you take a short rest, you have another couple of encounters, you take a long rest, is kind of like how it is balanced. And so there are certain times where like you'll kind of want to keep pushing yourself, but you're like out of spell slots, everything's on like cooldown basically. And so learning that sort of cadence of like, okay, I need to go back to camp and do a long rest. There's very few things in this game that are on like a time crunch, really, and it usually will give you a pretty decent like like unless you're just
even if it is, you'll get like
something.
Yeah, you'll get like 7 or 8 long rests to deal with it. Like when you get a companion kidnapped in Act 3. That's the only one I can think of that's time sensitive. And then maybe saving people in Moonrise.
The saving people in Moonrise is one, I think, or at least it might have been. It could have been patched at this point.
Yeah, if you like free the night song and then don't join the fight that same day.
Yeah.
Like the next morning, it's a cluster.
There's also like a random tiefling that like goes out into the world in Act 2 to like
to try to save his siblings.
Sister or something. And if you rest like two or three times without going to
you'll find his dead body.
He's dead.
There's
also
oh no.
There's also a couple of like characters that if you save them in earlier acts can be like up for execution in Act 3. And so if you just take your time there, they will get executed.
Oh, and then there's that newspaper that slanders you in Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
I was like, they immediately recognized me and were like, we're not letting you in here. Get out of here. And I was like, okay, fair. I just long rested.
My shit list.
Like, there's no real major consequences to them, right? Putting out a bad article about you, but it is like that would be a really fun thing to try and like get in there and sabotage that. But also, I was at the end of a day and was low on spell slots and the whole 9, and was like, okay, fine, sure.
So with the cult of what is it? Ball?
Ball, yeah.
Yeah, the guy who runs around murdering people. Is that something that you can in theory prevent some deaths based on timing, or are those like already set? I think
if you move into an area like where it's happening. So I don't know if you long rest after you first like get the list and start chasing after him and you have that first encounter.
Mm-hmm.
I did not long rest much at all in my first playthrough. Like I've probably long rested more just getting through the first 2 acts of the second playthrough.
I caught him at the hairdresser.
Yeah, at the clothing store or whatever.
Yeah, I caught him there as well. I saved maybe 2 people in that whole thing. I don't know.
I managed to save the shop owner and maybe like one other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kept accidentally stumbling across that encounter from the back as well, just exploring Baldur's Gate. And so I was like fully unable to get in the building and had to like reload and like loop around or like reload and do whatever. But I think I did manage to save I don't think I did save the Flaming Fist investigator that was after.
Yeah.
I think they targeted her pretty aggressively.
So any other things that we should cover from Act 1 or any things that you guys want to shout out in Act 1 before we hop to Act 2?
Did you guys ever get the Blood of Lathander?
Yeah.
Is that the wizard staff?
No, that's the mace in the Selenite temple in the Kresh.
Oh, no, I did not.
That one where if you leave Astarion behind to get blown up and then you buy him back from Withers, he has a tremendous line of dialogue.
Oh, where he's just like, you blew me up.
It's like, I thought you could
power of the sun.
Yeah, he's like, I thought you could handle the sun now. He's like, well, apparently there's a difference between a nice summer day and the full concentrated force of the sun. I didn't
Mhm.
actually get that dialogue. I just was like,
Yeah.
no, it's not hard to get out of here. Let's just get out of here. Kind of a moment.
Yeah. I saved scummed a lot in the creche because I wanted to keep Lae'zel, but I also wanted to give Vlaakith the middle finger. And so there are ways to do it. But one thing I did learn is that if you don't do it in the right order and you try to go get the blood of Lathander, Lae'zel goes instant hostile and tries to kill you. And then you cannot get her back in your party. Yeah. So
Well,
I
yeah,
had to-
because you get the blood of Lathander from like that courtroom, right? Like you basically have to defy Vlaakith and be like, no, actually, I'm not going to go in there right now. I'm just going to go root around
Yep,
for a little
that's
bit.
exactly what happens. Is she's like, get in the artifact, and you're like, give me a second. And Lae'zel's like, if you do not get in the artifact, I'm going to kill you. And you're like, whatever, Lae'zel. And then you try to do something else, and she tries to kill you, and you're like, oh yeah, she's very direct.
I have not ever greeted Vlaakith in any other way than that like stupid little wave you give her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was like, I will take the disapproval from Lae'zel every time because somehow you and I are already at 100% at this point. So like,
Yeah, because that is something in Act 1 that happens very quickly is like the romance and friendship is one track for for your companions.
Mhm.
And so
for sure.
it can vary, like, just by being like, by not just like, even if you're doing things that are not exactly what they like, you're still probably doing more good to your relationships with them than bad. And so like there's a point where all of them are like, hey, you want to bang? And you
Mhm.
you can make a choice very early on with
Yeah.
that.
I made Lae'zel mad because I hooked up with Karlak, and she was like, you could have had the best lover of your life. And I was like, well, maybe on my next playthrough, Lae'zel.
yeah.
Again, first playthrough, I had pretty solid tunnel vision on Halcyon. I was like, I mean, y'all are great, but I mean, look, he's big,
So that was me with Goth
And
GF
gentle,
Shadowheart
and nice. Yeah.
on my first playthrough.
Well, and on my first playthrough, because you can't really romance Halcyon until the third act, and only if you lift the curse in the Shadowlands, Shadowheart was into me, and so we had a pretty solid flirtation going on, and
Yeah.
had a
It helps
nice
that they're
little
both
moment.
like
Really
basically
good.
polyamorous, so you probably could end up with both of them if you want to do.
Yeah, I ended up after she went through the very traumatic ordeal of denying her god. I was like, I think we should break up, and she was like, sure, fine, whatever.
Jeez. Hard.
Yeah.
It's not
I
well
know.
timed. Like, look, you're going through a lot. Let me just, while we're dealing with things.
Yeah. Get it all
Let's
out
make
of
it
the way
worse.
right now.
Yeah.
She was fine.
So we've alluded a few little things to like Act 2. So basically Act 2 is you go into the Shadow Cursed lands and Moonrise Towers, because that is supposedly where you can find out more about this cult of the absolute. Like, it's got something to do with this parasite in you, and so like hopefully there are more answers there. Halcyon comes along because he's like, yo, I had something to do with this shadow curse. It came from this really bad guy named Ketheric, and we killed him, but when we killed him, he made this curse. So you go through, like, you have to have like a lantern or something to get you through the shadow in order for, like,
I mean, any light source will do.
any light source will do it, but they don't make that super clear until like you accidentally mess it up and find out, oh, any light is fine. But you kind of make your way through. You find the Harpers, which are like a faction in D&D that tends to be good. And so you go to the Last Light Inn, which is like sort of the stronghold of light and good in this shadow cursed land. Jaheira is their leader. Jaheira is a character, I think, from at least I think it's both Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. And so she's there. She's a druid. This person named Isabel is projecting like this orb to protect everybody. And so they're like, okay, you go figure out what we need to do to get into Moonrise Towers. And so you kind of go, you scout around, you've heard whispers of this thing called the Night Song that is supposedly Ketheric's weakness. Ketheric is played by J.K. Simmons, which I didn't realize until embarrassingly deep into hearing him talk.
Didn't we end up having to confirm that for you or something? I feel like we were talking about it at D&D one night.
Well, I think there was a point where I was just like, I think I texted the group chat or something, and I was like, wait a second, this is J.K. Simmons? Because I think I was on his IMDb page for an unrelated reason. And
Watching Invincible.
Well, and I was like, wait a second, he's in Baldur's Gate 3? Who's he playing that? And I was like, oh, snap, he's Ketheric. And so it was just kind of like
Which
a weird...
he's a tremendous performer, and I'm not saying that he only has one voice, but he is one of those people where I didn't realize that Minsk was voiced by Matt Mercer for an embarrassingly long time for someone who's listened to as much Critical Role as I have.
Yeah.
But also J.K. Simmons has such depth and gravitas, and he was certainly not doing some sort of weird, unlike himself sort of voice for it. So it was pretty funny when you were like, wait, hold on a minute. And we're like, yeah, dude, welcome.
I mean, most of what I know, when I think of J.K. Simmons, I think of Spider-Man, and I think of The Closer. So that's who my J.K. Simmons is.
I think of We Are Farmers, and You're Rushing.
I mean, yeah.
So now you're dragging.
I'm definitely Spider-Man, but then also Cave Johnson.
Yeah, fair.
Portal 2. Braedon,
yes.
You looked a little...
I know who Cave Johnson is.
Okay.
So eventually, as you're scouting around, the Last Light In is attacked. They can either get Isabel, capture her or not. But eventually, everything's pointing you towards, find the Night Song. So you go find the Night Song. You have to navigate through the Gauntlet of Shar, which is Shadowheart's god, who is evil. And eventually you make it in, and you find out that the Night Song is actually this Azamar lady.
Dame Aelin.
Aelin.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of where the first part of Shadowheart's personal quest comes up too, because she can either she's been telling you, oh, I really want to be a dark justiciar of my god. And so this is kind of her opportunity to either go down that route or not, by either killing the Night Song or letting her live and sort of rejecting her god. So my Shadowheart rejected her god in this moment. Did anyone kill Night Song?
Yeah, no, I hit her with the, no, you're too hot to be evil, haha. And she was like, you're right. And basically was like, I'm going to be a Selionite instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. First playthrough was big push, don't do this isn't you or whatever. And then the second playthrough as a Selionite, I was like, I really don't want you to do this, but this is your call to make.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, fine. I guess I won't be a heartless murderer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Little Miss gaining approval for most nice things you do.
Yes. Yeah, she Shadowheart, more than almost anyone else, is definitely the character where whether you go evil or good, she's like, I'm fine with this. This is cool.
Mm-hmm.
So once you free the Night Song,
Gale.
yeah, once you get the Night Song freed, or whatever you decide to do with the Night Song, you can attack Moonrise Towers. I don't actually know what happens if you decide to join with them, because I've never seen anyone do that on TikTok or anything. But I've always you attack Moonrise Towers. It turns out there's a Mind Flayer colony beneath Moonrise Towers. And so when you're basically getting to the end of the attack on Moonrise Towers, which I would like to throw out there, this is a part that I didn't realize. And so I was like, okay, I can't go to Moonrise yet because they're obviously going to kill me if I go in there.
Yeah, that was my thinking as well. It was I need to chase down this secret to his immortality first. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I then went in there, and it was a super tough fight because I hadn't sabotaged everything beforehand. And also I fought my way down, to the dungeons because I was like, okay, now I got to go free the tieflings that are, captured there, and they were all dead. And I was like, that's not cool. What's up? So I did look that part up, and they were like, you have to do all that before you free the Night Song. And so I had to reload my save. Thankfully, there is like an autosave right before you jump in and do the Night Song part. And so I was able to,
you can just double back and do it. You went about that so much better than I did. I fully fought Ketheric. I did none of the stuff in Moonrise Towers. I made it all the way through the Ketheric fight, the Merkel fight, the whole 9.
Yeah.
And then was like, why isn't Halsin joining my party? I was like, well, you didn't lift the Shadow Curse. And I'm like, and where are the tieflings? Like, I was digging all over Moonrise for the tieflings. And again, it's like, nope, they're dead and gone. And so I had to look it up and then backtrack like 3 hours of progress. And so then I was like, well, let me go do this. And oh, hey, I found that. And oh, whatever. And then those like 3 hours of gameplay ballooned into like 8.
Yeah. Because, you do eventually lift the Shadow Curse with Halsin as well. Like a part of it, and then the remaining part is, okay, now you got to kill Ketheric to finish lifting it. So there is a Mind Flayer colony beneath there. You go down into the Mind Flayer colony, and you get this cutscene where they're basically like, hey, here's the setup for the final act of the game. And so now this is something that probably wasn't a surprise for people who played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, because I think it's a similar situation where it's like, it's always the Dead 3 kind of coming up. And so the Dead 3 are Merkel, Bane, and Ball. And so they have their sort of like chosen their avatars that they basically try to destroy the world with. And so you find out at this point that Ketheric is one of the avatars of the Dead 3, Merkel. And he's down there meeting with Gortash and Orin the Red. And they've got Will's dad down there as a captive. And so they infect him with a Mind Flayer parasite. And that's when you learn that their plan is to like take over Baldur's Gate and then eventually the rest of the world. And so they kind of set the stage for that. And then you have the big fight against J.K. Simmons and the avatar of Merkel. Like he eventually. So for my playthrough, I was able to talk him down. So Isabel is his daughter, and so through talking to her and rescuing Dame Aelin and everything, I was able to kind of like,
and rooting around in his private quarters and talking to his demon dog.
Yeah, I was able to kind of like, so you do fight him like up on the tower before you go into the Mind Flayer colony, but then in the Mind Flayer colony you can fight him. You can kind of like convince him to sort of
you can also with the fight above. I've heard that in early development of the game, they kicked around with and maybe even recorded dialogue for being able to get Ketheric on your side and turn him back to Selûne and the light and everything. But they ultimately, I think, abandoned that because I talked him out of the fight at the top of the tower, even on my second playthrough.
Oh, wow.
But then Aelin showed up and she was like, no, we're fighting.
Yeah.
So then we had a pretty brief fight. And then
the DM was like, I planned this fight. You have to do it. Sorry.
Actually. And then once we got our way down in there, I was able, again, on the first playthrough, I fought everything twice. But on the second playthrough, I was able to talk him out of it. And he just like jumped in the hole. And then the big Merkel avatar thing popped up.
Yeah. Which is a pretty cool fight.
Mm-hmm.
But it also kind of like you finish up and it sets you sort of in motion to be like, okay, now we've got to go to Baldur's Gate because that's where everything is headed.
Yeah. On my second playthrough, I'd gotten Minthara because I'd busted her out of the prison. And then I had Lae'zel because I always try to have a fighter with me. And then I tend to keep Astarion with me because the sneak attack is clutch. Yeah. Doesn't require any kind of spell slots or, there's no limitation on it. So he's just super versatile to have around. And so at the end, in that cutscene, as the Shadow Curse is being lifted and everything's returning to light, and it's me, a yellow tiefling, walking out, and I've got Lae'zel, Astarion, and Minthara with me. And we're like, oh, yes, so we're leaving good in our wake.
Yes. We are the Guardians of the Galaxy.
What is this, some kind of Suicide Squad?
Right.
Best movie of 2016.
So, eventually, you go towards Baldur's Gate. You show up outside of Baldur's Gate, kind of on the outskirts. At this point, like the Dream Guardian's been kind of showing up sporadically throughout. At this point, he shows up in full, and you find out the truth about the artifact, basically, pretty early on. It's like you do a long rest pretty early on in Act 3, and it happens then. But you find out that the Dream Guardian is actually a mind flayer who has broken away from the nether brain.
Yep.
That is like their
power of Orpheus.
Yes, and so he has actually trapped Orpheus, the Githyanki prince that everybody thought was dead, and that is the power that's been keeping you from becoming mind flayers. And so obviously Lae'zel is not cool with this turn of events, and pretty much everybody else is also not cool with the fact that this mind flayer has been lying to you and pulling the strings the entire time. The mind flayer is like, hey, but we're still good, right? Also, do you want to bang?
Yeah, that was my first romance scene.
Yeah. And I was just like,
nobody
interesting.
else wanted to do anything. And I was like, I mean, yeah, I'll just reload the save. I got the mind blown achievement. I was like, oh,
nice.
No.
Nice. Now everybody knows that you banged him.
Now all of China knows you're here.
Yes. But so he calls himself the Emperor.
Because he's an egotistical jerk.
Yes. But you get to Baldur's Gate, they seem largely unconcerned with the fact that there's this massive army coming towards them.
And there's recurrent earthquakes underneath their feet.
Yeah. So they don't seem all that bothered. There's a circus going on that you can go hang out in, play some games, get your fortune told.
You do get a cutscene early on to show that Orin and Gortash are not getting along well.
No. And Orin continuously kind of shows up throughout, and it's just like, haha, I'm going to kill you, but not yet. And then Gortash is being like inaugurated as like the Archduke and stuff. So you get progressively further and further into the city, but your main goal now is you've killed Ketherick. You've gotten his, like, they have 3 stones. You've killed him, gotten his stone.
Crystals.
And so your main objective for Act 3 is get Gortash and Orin's stones. And so you're kind of exploring the city, trying to figure out ways to do that.
Yeah, and like as far as character backstories, Astarion, you'll have interacted with Raphael from Act 1. He's another avenue, theoretically, to get rid of your Mind Flayer parasite. And then Astarion will make a deal with Raphael to explain to him what the scars on his back mean, which...
No, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, which in my Tiefling playthrough, I am somehow accidentally romancing Astarion. I do think he is kind of a massive tool, and so I'm not really having a really fun time with it. I know he's, the internet's little wooby, but he's really just a dick.
He's a fop, F-O-P.
Yeah.
Which I believe is not a slur. Let me double check.
But so because I was a tiefling, I know Infernal, and so I could translate part of the scars on his back, but not really explain what they were for. And so then he'll make a deal with Raphael to kill a Cambion that's in the Gauntlet of Shar.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, when you come out, Raphael's like, yeah, it's this ritual that your, vampire daddy is going to use you to ascend to all kind of power. And Astarion's like, heck yeah, I want to do that. And then Gale also gets a visit from Elminster, who's like, hey, that reason you've been taking these magic items? He's got a nuke in his chest, and Mystra thinks you should kill yourself.
Well, that was Act 1. I think when Elminster first shows up and is like, Gale, you fucked up. And then Gale like gets to meet with Mistra, and she's like, okay, I've decided you don't have to die, but you do have to do this other thing for me. And then I'll be nice to you again.
Mm-hmm. And then so for like their character choices, you get like Shadowheart can kill the Night Song or spare the Night Song, and that drives her down a path, and Astarion can
become a super
But Gale
vampire
still is conniving though, because like he tries to get you to steal. I forget what exactly you
the
steal,
crown of
but
Karsus. Like he's pretty immediately like, we need to get into this wizard's tower so we can get info on the crown of Karsus, and then with that, I think I could become a god. And we're like, that is what got you in this mess in the first place.
Yeah,
Gale.
exactly.
And then Will is like, oh, we need to save my dad. And then
Still, bless
also,
him.
And we're like, no one cares, Will.
yeah. Well,
We
and then
don't
he's
like you.
like, okay, so if we don't save my dad, then at least like, let's try to like find the guardian of Baldur's Gate that's below the city. That's a dragon.
Which I stumbled into that accidentally. I was just
Yeah.
exploring around and like using the fly spell and whatnot, and just did all of that way out of order.
So yeah, Jaheira, it turns out her house is there and you meet her kids, and she wants you to find Minsk, which is also another character from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, who is returning, voiced by Matt Mercer. He's there and you have to go find him. I'm trying to think. Karlach is mostly done at this point. Like you, in Act 2, you were able to kind of like get her.
Yeah, her second engine
Her
repair
thing.
on her heart, and it's like,
Yeah.
you have to go back to Avernus or you're going to burn up and die.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, cool, I'm not going back to Avernus. And say, well,
yeah.
okay.
And then Shadowheart, like there's a temple to Shar here in Baldur's Gate. And so she's like, okay, I need to go back there now that I've either become a Dark Justiciar or betrayed Shar. I need to go back there and like, because they have my parents, basically because they mind wiped Shadowheart and kidnapped her and traumatized her. And
Dame Aelin, I think, is able to either provide insight or maybe even like help restore some of her memories.
yeah. And then there's also this creepy wizard man who wants to like capture Dame Aelin for
Larockin.
himself. Yeah. And I totally just killed him because
Oh, yeah.
he was a tool.
Same.
Yeah. And let Roland take over his tower.
Well, I didn't save Roland. He died
Well,
in Act 2.
Some
so-
of us saved all the tieflings,
I saved Roland, so
including
yeah, he also-
Maul. I got her
I-
contract back when I went to Raphael's place.
I did. So I want to, there's a ton that we could touch on. I want to touch on Raphael's House of Hope because that was such a cool zone. You go into
the music
hells.
for the fight is
Yeah.
worth
Oh,
the
it's
whole
Chef's Kiss.
game.
You go into the hells, you are kind of walking around his House of Hope trying to figure out what's going on. You can steal some of his contracts and get rid of them.
Because you're trying to get the Orphic hammer in order to
Yes.
free Orpheus. Because Raphael offers it to you in exchange for you giving him the crown of Karsus, which Gale wants, but then Kithrak Voss wants the Orphic hammer so they can free Orpheus, so they can overthrow Vlaakith. And it's just a
Yeah,
nicely interwoven web of plots.
Yeah, everything is kind of coming to a head in Act 3. And the end of House of Hope, Raphael shows up and is like, what are you doing here? I'm going to kill you. And there's like he sings you a song, like that is the soundtrack for the fight. And he's basically like,
Hell,
he's basically singing
hell
like,
has
you're
its
an idiot.
cost.
I'm going to kill you now.
Which his part is like funny. It's good, but like funny. But the female vocal
Yeah.
on it singing the chorus is genuinely like awesome. Like it's so cool.
Yeah. So it's an awesome fight.
Were either of you able to convince the Cambion to help you?
Yes, I was. I got a
was
very lucky
not.
natural 20.
Ooh, nice.
So, and he was like, sure, I'll come. I'll swap over to your side, which thank God, because I had died like 3 times in that fight already. Like, because I couldn't, like, I just kept dying and reloading
Mhm.
back to the talk. And every time I would be like, you
Well,
want to
let's
help me this time?
try.
And the time that I finally did win was like, he was like, yeah, I'm going to betray Raphael.
I did, now that I think about it, I think I did get him on my side for the fight that was successful. Boy, does he not do a ton. Like,
No.
getting him on your side is just to get him out of the fight, basically.
Exactly.
Let's see. Did you go to like third base with Harleap in order to get info on Raphael at all?
No. I don't even know who Harleap is, I don't think.
The succubus that's in Raphael's chambers?
Oh, okay.
That looks like...
No, he was just like, I'm going to attack you. And I was like, I'm going to kill you. I did lose a character because he pushed them out the window and they fell. And I had to resurrect them. So.
Nice. Yeah. I haven't gotten it. It's my goal to get it on this playthrough. But after you go along with him, he was like, all right, what do you want me to answer? Like, he'll give you intel about Raphael. And you can ask him, like, how's Raphael in bed? And I should say they, because they are either male or female, depending on preference. They just happen to take the form of Raphael because he's an egotistical jerk off. And if you ask him how Raphael is in bed, they'll be like, oh, terrible. Like, he's terrible in bed. He lasts seconds. Like, it's no good. And they laugh and will answer another question for you if you ask them that. So that when Raphael confronts you, he makes some comment about like destroying you in a second or whatever. And you can like make a snarky remark about like, that's not what Harleap says. Like, like how long you can last or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so I want to really just piss him off going into that fight.
Yeah. Because there's that. There's a whole part where you find out that the Emperor was actually Balduran, the founder of Baldur's Gate. And you do fight one of the 2 dragons in the Dungeons and Dragons game down there as well.
It was so disappointing that I would have absolutely betrayed the Emperor for that dragon for answer. Like, oh, he's actually Balduran. And because the whole time, like, for me, in terms of like characters that inspire frustration and disgust, if the Emperor wasn't so like, oh, well, you don't trust me because I'm a mind flayer or whatever, it's like, no, I don't trust you because you've been manipulative. Yeah. And I am going to try and find Omelium, that other mind flayer that's in Baldur's Gate. But he ranks, there's only one that's worse than him, and that's Wolbern Bongle. But yeah, that like fight down there where he's like, oh yeah, well, you know, you were going to kill me because I was turning into a mind flayer, so I killed you instead. And it's like, that's not cool, dude. Like,
yeah.
And so then you can't get the dragon on your side, and it's a big old like nothing burger.
Yeah.
It's
like
a cool fight, but
stuff.
it's like, yeah.
But yeah. So there's a bunch of like side stuff to get into the main stuff. Like Gortash and Orin both come to you and are like trying to make deals and be like, hey, why don't you kill this other person for me? And then like we'll team up. Gortash, to get to him, like you can just, I think, go straight to him and fight him, but he's got a bunch of like these big robotic steel watchers protecting him unless you go shut down the Steel Watch facility first. And so in that, you can either go, like when you're doing that, you kind of can find out like, oh, okay, there's also this underwater prison where they're holding the people making the Steel Watch's families as hostages.
And Duke Ravengard.
So I found that first. I found the underwater prison first because I was trying to like solve a different issue and just happened upon it. And so you go in, you blow up the Steel Watch, and then you can fight Gortash. If you blow up the Steel Watch first, he's kind of a laughably easy fight, which is predictable. He's not very, like, of the 3, he's definitely the one that's like, I'm just like a rich boy who, well, he wasn't rich, but he's like, I'm just like a frat boy who wants to be in charge. And
is a slimy little loser who sold out our dear precious Karlach to the Hells, and is the reason she's down there.
The much bigger problem is Orin. Like I said, she'll just kind of keep showing up and being like, I'm going to kill you, but not yet. And then eventually she kidnaps somebody, one of your companions.
Orin is a huge headache throughout the third act, but her
Yeah.
actual fight was like a joke.
See, for me, it was not a joke. This is the fight that I had to change,
Really?
like respec. So number one,
Getting to her was awful.
yeah, getting to her was not fun, but there is like a rest point right before her fight, so you can like reset everybody.
True. The fight where you're like in the big open area with the like castles around
Oh
you.
yeah, with
Yeah.
the dude casting power word kill.
Yeah, that fight
Ugh.
is really annoying. But yeah, that fight was harder, in my opinion, than actually fighting Orin. I don't know what it
So-
was. Maybe it's because it might have been because I had a fighter with the Helm of Baldur and Baldur, the like greatsword that you get. And I had some item that gave me haste, so I had like 7
Yeah.
attacks per turn.
This
I
man's
just
like, this fight wasn't
crush her.
hard. I could lay down 100 damage in a turn.
Well,
Yeah.
but also, so you were a fighter. See, my problem was I was like, okay, I'm going to like swap out my normal party because my normal party up until that point was Lae'zel, Shadowheart, me, and Asterion. And so I was like, I'm going to swap out
Mhm.
my normal party to, do some stuff with Will and Karlach and whatever. And so while I'm going around Baldur's Gate, Orin shows up and kidnaps Lae'zel. And so
She
don't
also
have,
took Lae'zel from me.
Yeah, so I did not
She
have
also took Lae'zel from me.
I did not have my
Best
main
girl.
like tank for that fight. And so I was trying to make do with Karlach, who at that point I had just been using her as kind of like a DPS. And so she was not spec'd into tank. So I was like, okay, I've got to like respec everybody at this point because this fight is ridiculous. Because also I think from what I've read after the fact, I think I killed Orin's grandfather / dad.
Ooh, same.
And
Mhm.
that causes her to instantly become like the big evil
Go into her Slayer form.
Slayer form versus like if you don't kill her.
I did that too, but I killed the Slayer form in 1 turn.
Okay.
So I don't know what the meta was or how I did it, but
Yeah. Well, because
I was just dunking on her.
Well, I was able to eventually dunk on her because my problem was every time we'd roll initiative, she would roll higher than me and she'd jump to my party, fear them all, and knock half of them prone, and then just like kill 2 people in a single turn.
Oh, you know what I did is because aren't there casters in that fight, like ads that are on the edges? So what I did
Yeah.
is
They're the
'Cause I
ones
was
who
a
keep
fighter.
healing her
Oh, that
up
fight was
after a
easy,
turn.
and you're like, oh, I cheesed it actually.
well, what I did is I would run up to them and
Yeah.
then I cheesed it a little bit because I had as a fighter with haste and all my hit dice, I was able to use the like pushing strike. So I would just knock them off the cliff.
Oh, nice.
And they would fall to their death.
That was eventually
then-
how I got it, was basically shoving them off the map.
Yeah. And then with I was doing a semi-throwing build with Karlach, and I had the legendary trident that you
Yeah.
get from the circus,
Mm-hmm.
which does like a knockback effect and like explosion when it lands. And so I was just using Karlach to yeet that thing to all the casters and was
Yep.
doing damage.
Yep. Yeah. So for me, it was a tough fight. That was probably the hardest fight in the game, second only to the Temple of Shar in Act 3, where you decide not to side with Vicona.
That one-
Devere.
Yeah, that one was a bit of a bear, but I also was a druid, so I could wild shape was incredibly helpful. Like the
Yeah.
owl bear wild shape was just shelf.
By the time I
chef's
got
kiss.
to that fight, I was pretty
I was level
much
12
like
at that
stacked.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I think I did that too early because
I had haste on my
sounds like it,
fighter,
yeah.
and so in 1 turn I was killing 3 people
Yeah.
in that fight, and then I had Asterion doing like range sneak attacks and just one-shotting them.
Yeah.
And so it still took a few turns just because there were so many of them, but
Yeah.
it
Like
wasn't that bad.
that's the main issue, was there are just so many
Yeah,
of them.
the crowd control was tough on that one. I found good old what's his face to be probably the hardest fight. I mean, Nier, at the level you're at, Nier is a real pain in the butt if you don't get some of the Dwegar on your side back near the Grimforge.
And Grimforge.
He was the one that made me drop difficulty my first playthrough. But
Yeah.
Czar, Astarion's master, what the heck is his name?
I don't remember it either, but that fight I also
Cazador.
cheesed.
Cazador.
That's it. Yeah, Cazador was a real pain in the butt. And of course I had Astarion with me, and he kept getting yoinked up to the ritual point. So I was basically down a party member throughout most of that. And then finally, I don't know how you do that fight without killing all of his brethren, because all of his brethren got like sunbeamed and moonbeamed. Like, sorry about your luck. You did.
So what I did is I cast I forget what it's called, but I think it's a cleric spell where you can just drop you just drop a sun on the ground basically.
Yep, same.
And so once I did that, he couldn't like go into his weird like gaseous form, and so I just again, fighter with haste. I was just bonking him over and over.
Nailed down some damage. No, basically, if you let the turn reset, he would heal, similar to Orin.
Yeah, no, for me, I dropped the sun, and I think I was able to get Karlak in there and have her, like, there was something where, like, when she got a crit, she would, like, stun whoever it was, and so she was able to, like, stun lock him, basically.
For whatever reason, my Karlak was, like, the target of every ad in that fight, and so she spent the whole fight moving, like, 4 feet, because she would get trapped in something. I forget what the effect was, but the his little minions that weren't the sacrifice ease,
like ghosts,
they
or
were
whatever.
super annoying. Yeah.
Which I want to say that was a Karlak Shadowheart Astarion deal, and so I had Moonbeam and I had Misty Step. So I spent a lot of it trying to just get Astarion like freed up so he could do the sneak attack damage, because he was pretty instrumental to my DPS. And then I had Shadowheart with the Spiritual Guardians running around doing radiant damage, and that's just so helpful for crowd control.
Yeah.
My fighter had boots that gave me Misty Step. I think they might have been the Hellfire boots that like explode wherever you land. And then I had the Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength, and I had the amulet that gives you like 20 Constitution. And then I had some item or effect that gave me haste once per long rest. So I would just proc haste and then slaughter somebody, teleport to somebody else, slaughter them. And because I had haste, my movement distance was increased, then run to somebody else, slaughter them.
Yeah.
Fighter late game is really overpowered.
Playing a fighter in our current one-shot that we're doing right now for like our actual D&D does have me wondering, like, why did I go like full caster for so long? Like, I was like, you know what? Let's do cleric, one of the heaviest casters, and then let's do druid, the only class probably more complicated. And so now I'm like, nope, I got one move and it's hit.
Fighter's biggest drawback is mobility and initiative. So if you can, at least in Baldur's Gate, there's plenty of items you can get to mitigate that. And so they become extremely overpowered in the like mid-second act into the third act. Ironically, or just oddly, the one mob I had the most trouble with was the prison guards in Moonrise Towers. For whatever reason, they had some kind of attack that would like, it might have been a disarm, which is why it was so annoying. But for whatever reason, they were like two-shotting my characters. And then I would have to waste an action to pick up my weapon. And so it was just like a whole ordeal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I did get the, and I ran a one shot where you guys fought a bunch of those. My brain's giving me wargs, and I don't feel like that's right. What are those like tiny dog monster things called? Gnolls.
Yeah.
There's a pack of gnolls in Moonrise that you can encourage them to kill the person beating up on them, and then they'll join you in the fight.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, Barnaby, get out of there.
Yeah. He had a noble sacrifice.
He did. Oh, Okay, totally off topic, and I don't know if you guys had this interaction at all in Moonrise, but when the I don't know if she's an orc or a half orc, like general lady in Moonrise, who sends you to go follow Ugly. One, I was like, oh yeah, well, show me what you can do, and she killed one of the big ogres, which was super handy. And then also when we had the confrontation and I like got the night song and I'm attacking with Jaheira and she's like, I thought you were going to be another notch on my bedpost, but I guess I'm just going to have to kill you. And I had a moment of, where on earth did you get that from? What
I did not have that interaction.
It was the most, like, that was more out of left field than some of the companions. Like, Lae'zel was, like, third long rest was like, I think we should sleep together. And I was like, well, you did watch me bully someone, so I can see why. But that one was fully the most out of left field sort of proposition my character has gotten in this game.
Yeah. Mine was Halsin.
Also, does she even have a
nice
bed?
To Halsin. Well, maybe.
Probably somewhere. I don't know if she's got a bed with posts, but...
Well, yeah. Moonrise did not.
Not anymore.
Like
They're all notched away.
Place. So anyway, eventually you get both of the Nether Stones. And at that point, basically the only thing left is, okay, you go confront the Nether Brain. And so you go to, like, you go underneath Baldur's Gate, you find the Nether Brain. Turns out, even with those stones, you're still nothing against this Nether Brain. I'm glad that I burned all of my inspiration trying to win those, thinking it would do something, and then it hit me with the, like, you have to roll a 35 on this one, which is literally impossible. So
you can get it with a nat 20, I think.
I know, but
with a nat 20, and I guess depending on what it is, because Astarion with the Cat's Grace robes and some of his, like, proficiencies and whatnot, he rolled like a 30. I think he maxed out at like a 38 on something one time.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it hits you with the 99 roll and you literally have to crit. And even then it's just like, okay, fine, we'll take like 50 health off of this fight.
Exactly. And so the Emperor brings you into the artifact again. And so at this point you're given the choice of like, okay, do you want, like, the Emperor is basically like, hey, I'm all like, you can free Orpheus after this, but like we need him now in order to win this fight. And you can either be like, okay, fine, or be like, you've been lying to me this entire time, I still don't believe you, we're gonna free Orpheus. And if you do that option, he's just like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna go join the other side then, because that totally makes sense. That part annoyed me. I was kind of
only to Wolbrin Bongle.
Yeah. Like that part, I was just kind of like, that's not logical. You could just leave. But so you free Orpheus. Orpheus is kind of a dick because he hates all mind flayers and you're infected.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially they come to the conclusion that like really the only way for this to work is we still need a mind flayer. We still need somebody to be a mind flayer. For me, I let Karlach turn into the mind flayer because she was already kind of like, well, I'm gonna die anyway, so let me do this. What did you guys do?
She did not volunteer for me. So
I mean, volunteer is a strong word. I kind of like, this seems like what Karlach would do.
Oh, so you like talked to her about it and were like, I think you should do it. I see. I don't even know if it gave me that option, but I convinced Orpheus to do it.
Oh, interesting. I bet that went over well with Lae'zel.
I mean, ultimately, he was like, I mean, if nobody's going to do it, then I guess I will do it and I will become what I hate. And so then at the end, once you defeat the mother brain, he then is like, okay, now I need you to kill me. And you're like, okay, I can respect that. And Lae'zel's like, no, let me do it. It's like, okay, Lae'zel. So then she'll kill Orpheus, and then she and Kithrak Voss, fly off into the astral space to go rebel against Vlaakith.
Yeah. Braedon, what did you do?
Like what path I took in the end?
Yeah, like did you free Orpheus? And if you did
No.
free Orpheus, you did not free Orpheus. Okay.
No, I did not free Orpheus. I managed to save scum roll to keep the Githyanki happy because I
Gotcha.
wanted Lae'zel. Lae'zel ended up doing her own thing. She was like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to rebel, but I'm also fuck Blackhead.
Yeah.
So, so I did that. Ended up essentially slaughtering the brain and dropping the crown into the gulf of Baldur's Gate.
Yeah. Same.
And then,
Yep.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and then I let
Gale's story with
Karlach
Mistra
go
was
into hell with Will.
totally unresolved. Yeah, I made the mistake of telling Will way back when, after we rescued his dad, that I was like, I mean, yeah, you could be the new Duke. Like, you could be the, still be the blade of whatever, instead of telling him to be the blade of Avernus. So then he was like, he did not volunteer to go with Karlach. So to get the cutscene, I did the whole like Doom Eternal, light the cigar, we're going to fight our way through hell thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then my actual ending was just me sobbing on a dock as she turned to ash, because I respected her choice to not go back to Avernus, and I didn't have an alternative. My character wouldn't have gone with her. I didn't want to go with her. That wasn't the ending I wanted for my character. So
Yeah.
I had a real sad conversation with Withers about Karlach in the epilogue.
For me, like, since she turned into a mind flayer, her machine stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So she was no longer in danger of dying from that, and so she just became like a good mind flayer that lived in Baldur's Gate. And
I just don't, I just think mind flayers, not a fan.
Yeah, I mean, fair.
Call me crazy.
Fair.
You lose your soul when you become a mind flayer. That's kind of a huge, I'm good on that, boss.
That is very true. Yeah.
And I didn't want any of my followers that I respected to also lose their souls. So I was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. I mean,
although I would probably let Gale do it, if I'm being honest.
Fair. Like I said, to me, it seemed like I had Lae'zel, Karlach, and Shadowheart with me, and it seemed like the type of thing that Karlach would volunteer for, knowing she was going to die anyway. So
yeah, like ultimately, she loses her soul, and so therefore still dies a noble death.
Yeah.
So
I just I thought it was a good ending for Will and Karlach on my first playthrough, and then on my current playthrough, I plan on going into Avernus with her because I'm romancing her.
Yeah,
and I'm a tiefling Eldritch Blast sorcerer, so
yeah, you guys will have
I kill some demons.
I really wish, and we're just getting on Karlach's ending right now, not the ending overall, but I really wish after defeating Raphael and restoring the House of Hope to Hope, there should be an option to be like, Karlach, go to the House of Hope, like hide out there until we can get this solved. Like, what that to me would have made much more sense for like a character ending for her than the like, again, Doom Eternal, like we're gonna fight our way through the hills kind of ending.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool in the epilogue. If you send Will and Karlach out together, they come back to your camp and they're like, "Yeah, we've actually been making progress and hunting down whatever to get this engine thing figured out."
Will's
so it's kind of on like a
and
just Will's pregnant. Yeah, no, Will is friend zoned, which is hilarious. They're like homies, and but it kind of ends on like a hopeful note for Karlach, and that like, oh, maybe there could be a solution.
That seems like the most positive ending for her, and also honestly Will, because Duke Will was just more of the like
a chode.
Yeah, like I didn't think that I would really take to this after all my time as the defender of the coast.
Will gives like,
and it's like, oh come on, man.
Will gives trust fund kid who spent 2 years in South America traveling, and then is like, this is my calling, but then ultimately ends up running his dad's company.
Yeah,
for the rest of his life, He's a nepo baby, basically.
Pretty much.
Which is not Will's fault; it's the writer's fault. But yes,
yeah.
So
you already alluded to it, but you do get an epilogue after this, where it's like it cuts to like 6 months later, and everyone kind of gets back together and updates you on what they've been doing. You get some fan mail from like various characters you've interacted with throughout the game. Withers is like, good job, but there will, stay ready because we may need you again eventually. But then Larian had a falling out with Wizards of the Coast, and so there's not going to be any DLC.
So what was your character on your like first playthrough or favorite playthrough? What was like your character's ending?
So my character went and traveled the world with Shadowheart, settled down.
Same.
So it was just kind of like, yep, that's fair. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I had a very Geralt of Rivia ending.
Nice.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, my druid settled down back in the now no longer Shadow Curse lands to basically run an orphanage with Halsin, which is very true to my Adira.
I did see Halsin's ending, and I was like, man, I can understand why Adira went after Halsin, because it's basically her life goal here.
Exactly. I had, the owlbear cub was all grown up and with me, and Scratch was with me. I took in every sad little pitiful thing I could along that.
Yeah.
And then, which was funny because I don't know if it's a glitch or something that needs to be patched or whatever, but you like walk into the grove with your partner. And so Halsin and I walked in like with the owlbear. And then as I'm talking to everybody in the epilogue, he's like, yeah, this is what I've been up to. And I'm like, I know. I was with you. There. Like, yeah, I could take this owlbear in. We've been taking care of the owlbear for 6 months. What do you mean? Like,
Yep.
Halsin's been in a fugue state for the last 6 months.
But overall, it's a neat little, like, I don't think the epilogue was there originally. I think they put it in after the fact. And it's a nice little, like, wrap up. You get the credits, then you get a post-credits scene where Withers is basically like, haha, you thought that I wouldn't notice, like, talking to, like, the Dead 3, basically. Implying that Withers is definitely, like, some sort of god. I forget if it's ever actually revealed in the game or if it's just speculation online. But Withers, who is basically, like, the guy who resurrects your companions if they accidentally die, he is a god that is traveling with you. I forget which one he is, though.
I think it's Jurgal is the name
Mm-hmm.
of the god. Scribe of the Dead.
Yeah. So.
Now, did he just show up in your camp, or did you guys actually come across, like, his little mausoleum?
I didn't come across it in my first playthrough, but I did on my second playthrough.
I don't know, because that was 110 hours ago.
He just showed up in my first playthrough. He was just in my camp, and I was like, who are you? There's a zombie in my camp.
So, anything that we have... Well, so who... Least favorite companion, most favorite companion? Rapid fire round, go.
Least favorite, it's a tie between Will and Gale.
Okay.
Most favorite is a tie between probably Lae'zel and Karlach.
Nice.
From a utility standpoint, least favorite's probably Minsk. I didn't use him ever.
Yeah.
Ever at all.
Yeah, I'm pulling from the like original 6. I don't really
I was going to
think
say
of...
Minsk and Jaheira felt like they came way too late for me. Like I'd already filled their roles by the time I got them, unfortunately.
Well, and I was a druid, and then I had Halsin, and Jaheira is another Circle of the Land druid. Like she was not even like a Circle of Spores, so it wasn't even like a different druid. Which, 3 owlbears in a fight could be fun, but...
Yeah.
I haven't experienced Minthara at all, so I can't
me either.
place Minthara.
Yeah, I just started playing with her a bit, and she's a paladin, so that's nice. Yeah, from a utility standpoint, I use Minsk like not at all. From a story standpoint, it's not his fault, but I'm going to have to say Will. Like, most parts of his stories, they didn't like quite connect or land. I didn't find the warlock to be a super helpful class to have around as like the caster that I was. For as often as it came up, it seemed to have as little impact on you in the plot as possible, which was super weird.
Yeah.
And then like Gale hung around camp mostly, but he did end up coming on the final run because he had taken the Globe of Invulnerability, and I wanted to do Barrelmancy for the fight with the Mother Brain. So he got to come along for that reason and that reason alone. So yeah, those two kind of are at the bottom. At the top, Karlach and Lae'zel. Karlach's just cool. Like, she's chill, she's friendly, she's nice to have around. She and I tended to agree on a lot of the choices we made.
Yeah.
And then Lae'zel had a really cool story. Deprogramming was an interesting thing to go along with, and lots of character development. And then she was also the best in a fight.
Yeah. My least favorites were probably Will, just because I didn't like utility wise. I just couldn't find a place for him in my party, basically. Like I liked him as a character. I just couldn't figure out, like, he just didn't fit any slot in my party really. And then Gale, because I felt like I felt like Gale's story took a long time to ramp up into a lot, and I just wasn't interested in Gale. And he comes with a huge downside at the very beginning, which is like, you have to give him magic items, and you're like, I don't like that. So, and then best, I gotta put Shadowheart up there just because I really liked her story. As a companion, she was like useless for 90% of my game until I respec her. Basically, I just gave her every spell scroll I picked up, I gave to Shadowheart, because I'm like, at least you can't fuck up casting a spell scroll. And so,
what spells were y'all picking for her? Like, I found her to be very helpful, especially in like the Shadow Curse lands.
She just misses all her attacks is the problem.
She missed all of her attacks. Like, she was fine as like a healer, but
I mean, but everybody saves on Sacred Flame. When I cast Sacred Flame as a cleric, literally everybody saves on it.
But also, like,
I'd use Fireball, I'd use melee attacks. It didn't matter.
Domain of Trickery, though, felt very situational. Like, it felt more out of combat stuff. And so in combat, I didn't feel like all of the Trickery domain stuff didn't feel like
Astarion does everything Domain Trickery does, but better.
Now that I think about it, I think I did respec her into a
literally any
cleric.
other domain is better.
Yeah. Like, if she was life
Shadowheart.
Cleric, then yeah, for sure. Like, she would have been.
Life Cleric or Tempest or...
Because, like, the channel Divinity
anything.
For Trickery domain was like, it made your character slightly harder to hit, but mine always still got hit anyway. And it was a thing that they could kill immediately. So Shadowheart, I also was a big fan of Lae'zel. Huge fan of Lae'zel. So, but yeah. I think we've already talked about who we romanced. Sounded like Braedon and I were both Shadowheart fans. You were a Halsin fan.
And I'm somehow accidentally romancing Astarion this playthrough.
Yeah, which, is...
Like,
it seems like that's a path.
This playthrough for me is Karlach.
Yeah. Well, everybody was pretty into me in like the camp scene. But I was like, I don't think I want to romance Karlach on this one. And
yeah.
I really don't think I want to romance Gale. So that kind of left Astarion. And then I'm like, well, let's just like chase this path down and see, because there was a lot I just didn't get with him story-wise on my first playthrough.
Yeah.
And we could honestly do a whole podcast about just the characters and their stories and how they are and everything. Like, this is a fully involved game, but a hot take. Astarion's pretty mid.
I like him a lot, but also I do feel like, since I had to wait 4 months to play the game because I waited for it to come out on Xbox, I felt like Astarion was a bit overhyped by the time I actually played the game. I was like, he's still cool and I still like him as a character, but it's also like, okay, like,
Yeah. I mean, he's not a good dude. And so for me, that's like, that's enough to be like
relentlessly traumatized.
Yeah. Well, all of them really.
All of them are. Yeah.
Except Will. Will's trauma. I mean, he still has trauma, let's be clear, but Will's trauma, not that we're picking and choosing, but his is very much the rich kid trauma, where it's like,
right,
Daddy
if
didn't
I had
say
to
I love
have,
you enough. Okay.
Well, I don't know if I'd want to have a contract with the devil, even though it's kind of his own fault.
Yeah.
Kind of, but not really. He was heavily manipulated into it, and cultists were trying to summon Tiamat.
Well, don't you find out that it was all just a vision, that he was like drugged up by what's her face?
Mizora, I think helped.
But there was like a line of dialogue where he realized that everything he was seeing ended up not being real.
Well, so she,
but it
I
wasn't
think,
until after he signed.
She set the stage and like set it up and everything, and it was never really quite that serious.
Yeah,
but she definitely made it seem that serious.
Yeah,
right.
So, hey, like Aubrey said, we could go on and on and on about this game. You know, we've talked about it for almost 3 hours at this point. It is a game that took us between 80 and 100 something hours to play through. Just one playthrough, and it sounds like you guys are already into your second playthroughs.
I'm at 190 hours.
Yeah. So, but we do have to wrap the episode up at some point. And so I think now is as good a time as ever to just kind of move into our verdicts. Because we've kind of covered everything spoiler wise. And so we're going to cover our verdicts here. How we do this is we give everything a rank on like the sort of tier ranking S through F sort of thing. These are our personal rankings. We're just throwing them out there. You can disagree. That's fine. We are fine with that. If you don't like this game, that's fine. If you do like this game, great. If you want to tell us what you think of it, feel free to jump in our Discord and, discuss it with us. Braedon, why don't you go ahead and tell us what would you rank this game?
Well, as of late, I've not really been gaming a lot. This is the only game I think I've played to completion in the last year or longer. So I think that just makes it a de facto S tier for me.
Yeah.
I would put it up there with The Witcher 3, which is also one of my favorite games of all time. I don't think it beats The Witcher 3 in my mind, but that is just for a lot of reasons outside of the objective. Because Battlefield 3 is also in my S tier, so that might be a hot take for some people. But it's all about where you were and when you were and how you were and why you were and who you were.
Art subjective? No.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my ranking. My personal opinion is that it is my ranking.
Braedon's fading fast.
Yeah, it's 11 p.m. and I have to go to work tomorrow.
Yep. So, Aubrey, what is your rank?
I'm on the cusp. I don't know whether the coin's going to fall on A+ or S tier. I probably should put it on S tier, just the hours I've put into it, all of the stuff. And it seems so silly with as much as the game has given us to be like, but I wish there was a little more of this, or if they had fleshed out that, because that's such an insane demand.
Well, I think that's a direct outcome of how broad the game is that they've given you so many flavors of little things that you're wanting things you didn't even know were possible until you were given a little bit of it by the game.
Yeah. So for me to be like, well, I wish there was, a Karlach ending at the House of Hope if you did that, or I wish, this storyline flowed better, or there was a little more attention paid to that, or whatever. Like, those are ultimately very small critiques of an excellent game. So I think talking it out, I've decided that Baldur's Gate is an S tier game.
Yeah, for me, I'm also giving it an S. I would put it up there. It's definitely one of my favorite games of all time. I would put it up there in direct competition with some of my other favorite RPGs of all time, like Knights of the Old Republic or the Mass Effect trilogy. I would definitely say that this is like right up there with those, maybe even surpassing those in terms of just like story and freedom of choice and getting to explore around the world and try out all these little things and find out that like the developers thought of that and here is something cool that you can do is just an amazing feeling. It isn't D&D the video game because ultimately it is still a video game. There isn't as much improv as they can, you can do in like a real D&D game, but this feels pretty damn close to D&D the video game, like a full experience of D&D, because pretty much almost everything you can think of you can probably try to do in this game.
And it's a tremendous tool to access D&D.
Yeah, the characters I think are pretty much all fantastic. Even the ones that didn't land for me I think are still great. I thought the story was fantastic. I loved that it was kind of just like, here is your problem, figure out how you want to solve it, because there's a ton of options. And there were a few boss fights, especially in like Act 3, that were kind of frustrating. But overall, I if that's a couple of hours of a 110-hour experience for me, it's like that's really kind of just nitpicky. Like Aubrey was saying, I think there's definitely things that I maybe wish were a little bit different. And there's, I think the biggest thing is, it left me wanting more, which I think just speaks to how fantastic the game is. So
yeah, I guess if I had to nitpick one thing, it would be that I wish Act 3 was more fleshed out and was a little bit longer. I get that like the overarching narrative kind of forces Act 3 to feel really fast because you're like everything is accelerating as the plot progresses. So by Act 3 you're moving at like 100 miles per hour. But I felt from like a gameplay perspective and a mechanics perspective, I finally had all this badass gear and felt really cool and powerful, and then the game was over.
Yeah.
So it felt like you spent 40 hours in Act 1.
Yeah.
Like 25 hours in Act 2 and like 15 hours in Act 3.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's external reasons for that, like just getting better at the game. Like you understand the game more as you play it. But Act 3 felt a little short, and I wish they would do a DLC. Because one of the reasons why The Witcher 3 is like my favorite game of all time is because there were 2 DLCs that were equivalent to their own games in terms of like quality and time and depth.
Yeah.
And so The Witcher 3, like I've played The Witcher 3, I've lost count, but I know it's more than 7 times all the way through. Because, I mean, for a variety of reasons, but that is one of the reasons. The DLC, every time a new DLC would come out, got to play through the whole game. And then, now I need to play through the DLC a different way because I've only played through the DLC once. Better play through the whole game again. And so, yeah, I feel like the end game could have had a longer presence.
Yeah. And I don't know how they could do it, but it would be kind of cool if they, and I'm sure there will be a mod that does this, but like basically a new game plus where you keep all your,
that was
like,
another Witcher 3 thing is that once they did new game plus, time to play through it all again.
Like you keep all your stuff and it just kind of rebalances the encounters so that everything is set at level 12, or maybe it keeps letting you level up to like 20 or something like that. Granted, they haven't programmed any of the classes to go above 12, but I don't know. Something
like with the rumors of like cut Avernus content as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so there are assets you could do a like Karlach DLC where you're saving your best girl, like
Oblivion 2.
Right. But yeah, no,
portals have opened.
I am interested to see what Larian does next. I'm interested to see what Wizards of the Coast does next with Baldur's Gate and just like
you will
D&D
watch your career
games.
with great interest.
But overall, this game is worth checking out. This game is worth playing. I could see there being some people who just don't get into it, but it seems like it has such a wide appeal for so many different people just because of the way that the game is. Like, even if it's not the type of game you traditionally play, I think it does a great job of just hooking you with great characters and a great world. So
for sure.
Yeah, the critique I saw the most from people who weren't able to get into it is if you have no prior understanding of D&D or how like dice-based games work, just learning the mechanics of the game and figuring out just how to play it effectively, there's a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
But it takes maybe 3 or 4 hours of gameplay, and then you kind of get a feel for it.
And like I said too, at the beginning, you can set it to an easier mode as you're learning, and then ramp it up if you feel like it, or just play on the easier mode.
Yeah, I think it's worth it just for the story, even if you have no understanding of Faerun or anything like that.
Yeah,
it's just a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Aubrey, Braedon, do you have anything that you want to plug or shout out, or anything that you're doing to give a little shout out to?
I'll shout out Parents Guide to Gaming again, since Andrew's not here to plug it, and he's bad about plugging it. It's a side project that Andrew started, providing reviews and informational resources for parents in order to more effectively engage with the hobby of video games with their kids. Our plan is to do reviews and information type videos on games of a variety of genres. So not just like kids games, but also more mature games, so you can be more informed about the content of the game your kid is asking for. So yeah, check that out if that seems like it would be of interest to you.
Cool.
Only thing that I need to plug is my bathtub when I take a bath. So
all right.
I don't do anything with my life, so I don't have anything to plug.
That is totally fine. So if you have made it all the way through, I dub you a super fan. If you are a super fan and you haven't already left us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to these podcasts, that would be super cool if you could go do that. That really helps us out, helps grow the show. If you're one of those people, there are roughly like 50 or so of you every week listening on YouTube. Be really cool if you could like or comment or subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're doing that on YouTube.
And also disagree really harshly with all of our takes, please.
Yes.
Comments are engagement.
Yes, any engagement is good engagement. If you want to follow us on YouTube, and not just listen to podcasts, we do post videos over there. We will have, I don't know when this comes out, honestly, at some point this will be out there, but I know
June 14th, Flag Day. I'm calling it now.
We'll see.
No,
we'll
if
see
that's a Monday.
Right. Anyway,
I didn't know that. No, that's a Friday.
there will be a couple of videos. I know recently we've had a video where Aubrey did sort of a video essay on Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice for us, and then I believe there's another. We release videos every other week. We also put some shorts up there if you're one of those people that uses YouTube Shorts. So check that out. If you want to talk with us more about Baldur's Gate 3 or any other gaming topic, we do have a Discord. You can find that link in the description, probably. I don't know. I'm not going to put it there. Andrew will. But check that out. But yeah, anyway, thank you for your time. It was a beefy one. And go play Baldur's Gate. Go play Dungeons and Dragons, man. Like...
by the way, to all the listeners, if you are unsatisfied with my audio quality, you can submit a formal request to buy me a mic that doesn't suck via whatever communication channels they typically have on this.
Based on everything
podcast.
you're telling us about your troubleshooting, you need a whole new computer.
Yeah.
I would take that too. If somebody wants, just make sure it's a 40 series card at least.
Okay, beggar now become a chooser. You can.
Hey, 4060s are cheaper than 3080 Ti's, I think, or 3090s.
I will take your word for it, but you were wrong about the spoiler, so I don't know.
I have an Xbox. It just works. So I don't have to deal with all this nonsense.
It sounds like a jet engine every time it turns on.
No, I keep
No.
it clean.
Or that's PlayStation's.
Yeah. You can submit that request, just do it on Discord so that at least you become a member of our Discord community. That's the only place we are taking those requests. Thank you.
YouTube comments are fine too.
Sure.
Just because I think it'd be hilarious to see a bunch of comments that are like,
Right.
buy this dude a mic.
Yes. All right. So that is it. Cool.
Lace your heart with mine. Let your sleeping soul take flight. Take